Good evening, everyone. If you could please take a seat, we'll go ahead and get started. Please, thank you. Good evening, and welcome to the public hearing on the New York State Climate Action Council Draft Scoping Plan. My name is Doreen Harris. I'm the president and CEO of the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, or NYSERDA, and here today as co-chair of the New York State Climate Action Council. I'd like my co-chair to introduce himself now. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. I'm Basil Sagos, Commissioner of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and co-chair of the Climate Action Council. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to this wonderful facility for hosting us tonight. I'll allow my co-panelists to introduce themselves.
Thank you so much. My name is Raya Salter. I'm the founder of the Energy Justice Law and Policy Center and an appointee of the Climate Action Council.
Hi, I'm Paul Shepson from Stony Brook University.
Hi, I'm Peter Iwanowitz, and I'm appointee from the Assembly by Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie.
I'm Rose Harvey, and I'm an appointee to the Climate Action Council.
Secretary of State Robert Rodriguez with the Department of State.
Hi, I'm Ruth Ann Wisniewskis. I'm the Commissioner for New York State Homes and Community Renewal.
Hi, I'm Roberta Reardon. I'm the Commissioner for the New York State Department of Labor.
Thank you. This hearing is one of 9 in-person and 2 virtual hearings being conducted across New York State to ensure that we hear from all interested parties on our draft scoping plan, which was issued on December 30th, 2021. So tonight's meeting will be live streamed on the Climate Action Council website, and a stenographer will take record of any verbal comments received as well. All comments provided here will be considered by the Climate Action Council as it finalizes the scoping plan by January 1st, 2023. And written comments are also being accepted through June 10th, 2022. And with that, I will now hand the hearing over to our facilitators to run through the structure of tonight's hearing.
Thank you, Doreen. Hi, everybody. So my name is Nora Madonic, and I will be facilitating tonight. The way tonight is going to work is that we have the speakers, people who are registered speakers. You were given a card, and the card has a group number on it. We'll be calling you up in groups, and you will have 2 minutes to make your testimony. If you need a translator, we have a Spanish language translator here, and if that's the case, you will have 4 minutes to make your testimony. We are going to run a pretty tight ship tonight because we do have, although a lot of people are still outside, we do have about 200 people, 230 people registered to speak. And even at 2 minutes per person, we will not in all likelihood get to everyone, but we will do the best that we can. For everyone else who's in the audience, I have a job for you too. And the job is to listen, and the job is to be polite and to be considerate. You're going to hear comments that you agree with vehemently. You're going to hear comments that you oppose just as vehemently. What we want to do here is listen to everyone. The more voices that are heard, the better the outcome. Every opinion matters. So we want to really pay attention and be polite. Okay, so let's get started. Group 1. Group 1 could line up behind Joseph. Joseph, if you could just raise your hand up. So as you come forward, Joseph is going to hold the microphone for you. We're still practicing health, and he has a glove on and he's holding the mic. So please don't try to take the mic from him. He won't let you have it. He will take your card, he will read your name and your affiliation if you have one, and then we will start the timer. So could we start with the first speaker, Joseph?
This is Rohit Agarwal from the Mayor's Office.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Rohit T Agarwal. I'm New York City's Chief Climate Officer. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. As time is short, the city will submit written testimony on many aspects of the final scoping plan, or the draft scoping plan. Here in person, however, I'd like to make the case that the final scoping plan and its implementation must embrace the interdependency between New York State's climate agenda and New York City's climate agenda. As you know, the city is 43% of the state's population, 50% of its economy, more than 50% of its taxes, 59% of its disadvantaged communities, and a quarter of its greenhouse gas emissions. Our legally mandated greenhouse gas limits parallel the state's, and we rely heavily on the state's energy and transit policies. In short, New York City cannot achieve its climate goals unless New York State achieves its climate goals. And New York State cannot achieve its climate goals unless New York City achieves its goals. Right now, the city and state are working very closely together, and I thank you for your partnership, especially thinking about the work we did together on the Tier 4 renewables contract, which required both the great leadership of the governor and a significant commitment by the city. But there have been times in the past when the state has disadvantaged New York City. Funding formulas gave unfair preference to smaller communities. Programs have in the past excluded building types and ownership structures prevalent in New York. And the state has on occasion had funding rules that punished New York City for leading with mandates. There are a number of things that we hope you can do. You can put state funding behind our efforts to help buildings comply with Local Law 97. You can work with us to turn power plants in disadvantaged communities into energy hubs. You can prioritize the electrification of vehicles that operate in the areas with the most people exposed to ambient air pollution. Again, the city and state will succeed together. We have no choice but to work together. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I just want to say to the folks who are standing on the right, we need to find seats, please. Fire code requires that. Thank you. Joseph, who's number 2?
Kizzy Charles Guzman from the Mayor's Office.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Kizzy Charles Guzman from the New York City Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. The city and state are largely aligned on the policies outlined in the draft scoping plan, and we are eager to continue to partner to tackle climate change. For the city, that means investing in programs that prioritize environmental justice neighborhoods, create local jobs, and reduce health disparities. We see additional opportunities in the draft scoping plan to achieve our joint climate goals, and I would like to outline a few today. As you know, buildings contribute nearly 70% of the city's emissions. We're implementing Local Law 97's emissions limits for large buildings and the phase-out of combustion of on-site fossil fuels in buildings. We are committed to decarbonization, but we cannot do it alone. We want to partner with the state to ensure that all buildings, including 1 to 4 family homes, have financial support and assistance to decarbonize, achieve energy efficiency, improve air quality, and improve resiliency. To meet the state's targets and catalyze jobs across New York State, there is a critical need to provide resources to implement this work. In addition, New York City comprises likely 59% of the disadvantaged communities' census tracts based on the draft criteria. We ask the state to ensure geographic equity with respect to the distribution of investments. We also ask that the plan focus on cost burden rather than income, which is vital in high-cost markets such as this one. This includes focusing on the relationship between electricity rates and electrification efforts and mitigating cost increases to customers. The plan is an opportunity to proactively identify alternative sources of funding to pay for the needed investments to achieve a clean energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. For those who are coming in, if you have a card, a speaker card, if you would find your row and sit in your row, that would be great. And if you don't have a speaker card, you want to sit back in the mezzanine. Okay? Joseph, could we have another speaker, please?
Catherine Bresler, Special Advisor to the Queensborough President.
Hi, I'm here to make comments on behalf of the Queensborough President and the next generation. The final statewide scoping plan will not only serve as our guide for climate action in coming years, but it will also have a profound impact on the energy planning, the built environment, climate response, state and private sector spending, and the lives of your constituents who will be increasingly impacted by the climate crisis. This is a groundbreaking opportunity for the state to chart a holistic plan to advance equity and economic development through slashing greenhouse gas emissions and transitioning to an electrified clean energy economy. New York's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act established a state mandate to address climate change by transitioning to a full net zero economy by 2050. When it comes to climate spending, we must direct a significant portion of state dollars toward our climate disadvantaged communities, with the disadvantaged communities criteria informing our decisions. Besides the health impacts of climate change, the combustion of fossil fuels creates pollution responsible for significant morbidity and mortality. In Queens, this means our neighbors' lives could be spared, because we chose to slow the catastrophic impacts of climate change. The Astoria's Asthma Alley and coastal communities like Far Rockaway to our inland areas like East Elmhurst that flooded during Hurricane Ida. Climate change has claimed the lives of too many too soon. In terms of what the DEC can do, Hurricane Ida's impacts and those of other storms elsewhere in the state should drive us to develop statewide flood risk mapping strategy along with regulatory program to ensure protection of stream buffers to protect and enhance waters and habitat quality, reduce flood risk, and prevent soil. I'll submit our comments. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. For those who are waiting to sit, if you're here to speak, you can certainly come in on the other aisle. Joseph?
Louise Yang, Chief Climate Officer, New York City Office of the Comptroller.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Louise Young, the first Chief Climate Officer to serve at the New York City Office of the Comptroller, testifying on behalf of Comptroller Lander. Our office takes a long-term view in managing risks facing the city, including the climate risks that threaten our financial, physical, and social future. The Climate Action Council analysis shows us that a just transition requires ambitious action, but it is achievable if we act collectively and urgently. Our office supports a full and complete rapid transition off of fossil fuels and to a net zero emissions grid by 2040, sustainable transportation and waste sectors, and accessible pathways to good jobs in the green economy. We can start with a moratorium on new fossil fuel infrastructure and by retiring the Ravenswood and Astoria NRG gas power plants and turning them to clean energy hubs. We must pair this with significant investments in proven renewable solutions like wind, solar, heat pumps, and battery storage. And most importantly, the scoping plan must prioritize electrification and decarbonization for our low-income and environmental justice communities without jeopardizing energy affordability by committing public resources to building and appliance retrofits to ensure just and equitable transition for all. We want to see more detailed roadmap towards electrified and sustainable transport and ramping up EV adoption by strategically leveraging federal infrastructure dollars, removing regulatory barriers, and creating the right financial incentives to increase EV readiness across the state and city. We support stronger producer packaging responsibilities that reduced waste going into our landfills, along with commitments to fully resourcing composting and recycling programs, including expanding organics collection in NYC, not reducing it. This analysis shows us that this is not only the financially and economically prudent, these mitigation strategies are estimated to save $90 to $120 billion compared to the cost of inaction and create 198,000 jobs. We cannot squander this moment. This plan will guide our climate priorities and investments for decades to come. We must be ambitious and fully commit to a just transition to a clean energy future. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next.
Sarah Young from Brooklyn, New York.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to testify on the proposed draft scoping plan. I'm a proud Brooklynite, born and raised, as are my 15-year-old twin boys. I would like to encourage the Climate Action Council to establish the most aggressive final plan for the sake of my children and all of our children. My son has asthma, which is far too common in children today. New York has consistently been above the national average for asthma for at least the last 5 years. The boys went to elementary school in Gowanus, where a summer rain can now cause devastating and dangerous flooding. Recent hurricanes from Superstorm Sandy to Ida have caused enormous damage and killed way too many. The Climate Action Council needs to address this and so much more. The CLCPA is the law in New York, and it is time to treat it like one. We are counting on you, the Climate Action Council, to ensure that your mandates are legally enforceable against industries and include timelines for emission reductions by sector. Provisions for environmental justice and emission reduction mean nothing if they cannot be enforced or if there aren't rules in place for what happens when our climate justice laws are broken. The future of the children of New York and well beyond are in your hands. This is Brooklyn. This is New York. We are ambitious. We go big. We get it done. Let's do it for the kids.
Thank you. Joseph?
Lacey Tuber from the Brooklyn Borough President's Office.
Hi, my name is Lacey Tauber. I'm the Legislative Director for Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso. He sends his apologies for not being here, and a big thank you all to doing this here in Brooklyn. We have a long testimony that I'm going to try to summarize quickly. The Borough President is very excited about the potential of the CLCPA to kickstart a just transition and build the green economy, both of which are imperatives for our city's future. And he very much appreciates that the draft plan centers our environmental justice communities, of which there are many here in our borough. I want to focus on some Brooklyn infrastructure things. Brooklyn is well positioned to lead the city in building the green economy. We are particularly excited about the offshore wind hub that's coming to Sunset Park. We think it's a great example of a project that will bring hundreds of jobs to an environmental justice community while helping to usher in our clean energy future. We want to go farther. We want to convert the peaker plants in Sunset Park and Red Hook from fossil fuels to renewables. And we want to stop National Grid's North Brooklyn pipeline proposal because we think that adding more pollution and greenhouse gas emissions in Brooklyn's communities of color is not the way forward. It's actually undermining the CLCPA's goals. On transportation, the most important thing that New York State can do to make New York City more sustainable is to fix the MTA. We want to see it be clean, efficient, reliable, accessible, and affordable, more select bus service, new and innovative public transportation options like the Interborough Express, more protected bike lanes, expanded micro-mobility options, fixing dangerous intersections and making the borough more accessible, designing streets for people, not cars. We have a long section in here about a program that we do called the Heat Cool Smart Brooklyn program, which is a heat pump incentive program. There are some barriers to adoption that we want to see addressed through like a robust outreach and education programs. Waste is obviously very big for the BP.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay,
Thank you.
sorry.
That's all right.
There's a whole bunch of stuff in there about waste. I hope you'll
Joseph, next.
Joaquin Brito on behalf of Elizabeth Yempierre.
Good afternoon. I am here on behalf of Elizabeth Yempierre, Executive Director of Uprose and member of New York State's Climate Justice Working Group. Founded in 1966, Uprose is Brooklyn's oldest Latino community-based organization working at the intersection of racial justice and climate change. Uprose is a member of New York Renews, a statewide coalition of over 300 organizations who helped pass the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act in 2019, and have since been working tirelessly to ensure the implementation of the law, which is equitable and supports disadvantaged communities like Sunset Park. The CLCPA is the most progressive climate law in the country and sets out to reduce pollution, build clean energy, create thousands of local jobs, and invest directly in disadvantaged communities to fund community-led climate solutions. The solutions will address the legacy of inequity, disinvestment, and extraction to ensure frontline communities have access to clean air, water, food, housing, transportation, while also having access to good-paying jobs that support their families. The CLCPA must serve as a model across public and private sectors and prioritize moving a minimum of 40% direct investments to frontline communities, those most impacted but less responsible for climate change. 40% investments is the baseline and not, we repeat, not the ceiling in order to protect communities and build equitable systems that allow communities to survive and thrive in the face of disasters. The CLCPA must operationalize a just transition by working with communities to fund community-led solutions like the Green Resilient Industrial District, also known as the GRID Plan, that doesn't force people to choose between their livelihoods, health, and future. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph?
Sandy Nurse, Council Member, New York City Council.
A little bit higher. I'm taller. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Councilmember Sandy Nurse, and I represent the 37th District. My district in Northeast Brooklyn is a designated disadvantaged community, a frontline community that now must be prioritized in New York State's historic transition to cleaner, greener sources of energy, reduced pollution, and economic opportunities. I am here today in solidarity with my constituents, advocates, and workers fighting for a just transition in Brooklyn and New York State. The CLCPA lays out critical and transformative mandates that will shape the future of our city, and I am here because we must meet these mandates with urgency and clear pathways for implementation. As chair of the Council's Sanitation Committee, I recognize the speed in which New York must move to meet the CLCPA goals through reforms in the waste sector. As such, New York City Council is working to advance our climate, equity, and zero waste goals through key policies, including commercial waste zones, which is a comprehensive reform of the private sanitation sector, waste equity, which reduces the amount of solid waste sent to 4 overburdened communities of color, equitable access to community composting and recycling networks in every community district, and universal curbside composting, which would mandate residential organic waste collections by the end of 2023 for nearly every building in New York City. To make these laws more than just words on paper, all of these key initiatives will require public investments in programs, operations, education, and infrastructure. I would like to express my enthusiasm and support for the recommendations in the CLCPA draft scoping plan for waste, including organic waste reduction and recycling, waste reduction, reuse, and recycling, and extended producer responsibility, all with continued public engagement for decision-making. New York must also further embrace scenario 3 for the clean air in a healthy environment portion. I just want to also say that I know there are workers here that might be hesitant to what's being said, and it's important that we get it right with them. It's important that we invest in just transition so that all workers see themselves as part of this future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Could I have group number 2? Vince, could you raise your hand? Could I have group number 2 line up behind Vince, please? Joseph?
Jermaine Williams, Public Advocate.
Jamani. Thank you, Climate Action Council, for allowing me to speak today. New York must make sure the implementation of the CLCPA is adequately funded, actually enforced, and prioritizes a just transition. We must begin the difficult and hopefully shared pain work of transitioning away from fossil fuels today. Vulnerable communities in our cities are already too familiar with the dangers of climate change. Last year, 13 New Yorkers lived in the basement apartments in Queens were killed during a flood surge from yet another once-in-a-lifetime storm, which have rapidly become more frequent, damaging, deadly norm. Our city and our neighbors deserve more, and they deserve better. New York needs a long-term transition away from fossil fuels, and this law helps to accomplish that. We must acknowledge that this is not only possible, but the only way forward. The entire world looks at this country. The country looks at New York. We have to lead here. To begin, we must end the use of natural gas in all new construction. Last December, our city took the right step in phasing out fossil fuels in new buildings, and our state needs to follow the city's lead. The legislation in the state would complement the CLPCA and show New York is serious about reducing the use of fossil fuels. As we move forward, it is essential that we center renewable energy and environmental justice, especially for the people who are left behind by economic advancement or victimized by environmental abuses. Climate change only exacerbates existing inequities, particularly in communities of more color. These communities deserve more than the false solutions that many are presenting: renewable natural gas, green hydrogen, when we have real solutions that we can offer both good jobs and clean energy. We need a strong act for a strong New York. We need a resilient act for a resilient New York. We need a bold act for a bold vision of what can be done. The CLPCA can be a monumental step forward in our city, but it first must be fully funded and enforced. Communities cannot be left to fend for themselves amid the most dire consequences of climate change. I again thank the council for allowing me to speak. I also, too, want to lift up the workers and the unions who are here, who I understand are worried about their jobs. We must make sure that anything we put forward answers their questions, because they have families to feed, they have livelihoods as well. We have to stop making these divisions of jobs or clean energy. Peace and blessing, love and light.
Thank you for your comments. Vince, you ready? Vince?
Shay O'Reilly, Sierra Club.
Good afternoon. My husband, our toddler, and I live in rent-stabilized housing, like many New Yorkers. Our building in Flatbush formed a tenant association last year after years of neglect by our landlord, including recurrent and catastrophic leaks, vermin, and broken windows. Like many buildings of our class in Brooklyn, our indoor air quality is low. We do not have an exhaust fan in our kitchen. Our gas stove, we now know, produces nitrogen oxides in excess of what the EPA allows outdoors. These compounds, also found in car exhaust, which our neighborhood has in abundance, trigger asthma attacks and lead to the development of asthma. During a routine daycare cold this winter, my 2-year-old daughter started wheezing. She now uses an inhaler twice a day. She insists each time that we practice first on her stuffed doggy. You've heard a lot of scaremongering about the cost of retrofitting buildings and replacing fossil fuel appliances. That's not a reason not to act. It's a reason to have a clear plan to address the costs of inaction. The final scoping plan must be unequivocal in its moratorium on new fossil fuel generation, and it must require all-electric new construction in buildings. The final scoping plan should explore real solutions for the gas network, not hydrogen fantasies, but things like district geothermal heating, solutions that work at the level of density we have here in Brooklyn and that work for tenants and homeowners alike. And we have got to get these child-choking gas stoves out of our homes. I support the CLCPA in its entirety and Scenario 3 in the scoping plan. Stop new gas, invest in our communities so that our air can be cleaner and our homes healthier. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Joseph?
Shravanthi Kenikal of the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance.
Good afternoon. My name is Shravanthi Kanekal, and I'm testifying on behalf of Eddie Bautista and the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. The most recent IPCC report underscores the overwhelming urgency of this moment. The report states that the impacts of the climate crisis, from extreme heat, intense rainfall, and flooding, will only continue to intensify unless we choose another course forward for ourselves and generations to come. The impact on our economy and the health of New Yorkers will be tremendous if we don't act now. New York needs to make a rapid transition in energy, urban infrastructure, transportation, and industrial systems. The health and welfare of communities that are at the front line of the climate crisis must be prioritized. Environmental justice communities across New York are disproportionately exposed to cumulative burdens that have life-altering public health consequences. Neighborhoods like Sunset Park, South Williamsburg, and the South Bronx suffer disproportionately from poor air quality due to toxic fossil fuel burning, polluting infrastructure cited in these very communities. The scoping plan must set clear year-by-year targets for replacing these fossil fuels with renewable sources built by and for our communities. We need a guarantee that these targets will be met using proven renewable energy technologies, not false solutions like biofuels, renewable natural gas, or green hydrogen. Of the 3 scenarios put forward in the draft scoping plan, we're advocating for Scenario 3, low to no bioenergy and hydrogen combustion and electrification of buildings and the transportation sector. We need a dedicated funding mechanism to ensure reductions of both greenhouse gas and co-pollutant emissions, and to begin the state's large-scale transition to an equitable renewable energy economy, which can be achieved through an economy-wide polluter fee, which will generate the necessary funds in a just manner. We're seeing the devastating impacts of climate change worsen over the years, and we cannot wait any longer to move off of fossil fuels. Now is the time when bold leadership can make a difference, and the scoping plan must ensure equitable policy measures that will guide the state to an economically sound, just, and equitable clean energy future. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have group 3? You want to raise your hand? Vince, raise your hand. Vince, your hand. Thank you.
Amanda Clevenger, Policy and Programs Manager, Bright Power.
Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Clevenger, and I'm the Policy and Programs Manager at Bright Power, the leading provider of energy and water management solutions for multifamily and commercial buildings. We are thrilled to offer our support for the most ambitious climate mitigation planning effort any state has ever undertaken, especially for the building sector. I would like to recognize the work of the agency staff and the advocates who have crafted this plan, as we would definitely not be here without your effort. The Council correctly recognizes that we will not meet the goals of the CLCPA without significant investment in building electrification. We will need flexible financing products, incentives for electric panel and distribution upgrades, money for building shell measures that reduce peak demand, a well-paid workforce that can install and maintain advanced heat pump technology, operating cost subsidies to support buildings on electric utility rates, and so much more. But increased subsidies alone are not going to be enough to meet our goals. We need legislation at the state level to drive decarbonization, and we support the Council's consideration of a wide-ranging options, including updates to building codes, building performance standards, and carbon pricing. We applaud the Council for exploring these necessary policy approaches, and we strongly recommend that for existing buildings especially, the Council consider the market signals that are going to be necessary to promote efficient electrification. Bright Power has performed nearly 24 electrification feasibility studies, and we've seen firsthand that the pathway towards deep decarbonization requires both converting to heat pumps and energy efficiency measures. The policy options considered by the Council must drive both of these goals simultaneously, in addition to other priorities like demand response, on-site solar and energy storage, all of which will be necessary to meet our climate and resiliency goals. We look forward to joining the Council in its work on these important issues, and we thank you for this opportunity to offer our support today.
Thank you. Joseph?
Tamara Schwartz of the Sierra Club.
The scoping plan should include measures to get New York to be using totally renewable energy by 2050. I plan to make my next car an electric car, and we can have everyone driving electric cars with charging stations available throughout the city. We also need to legislate the conversion to electric trucks and vehicles in all industries. We should have all buildings converted to electric power with no coal or natural gas involved. The changeover to clean energy can occur by attrition, as old plants and cars are no longer usable. They can be replaced with renewable energy substitutes. New York can be an example to the country and to the world. I know that in many places in Europe, they are changing over to renewable fuels, as are other places like New Zealand and Iceland as well. I think if we reach a tipping point, then other places in the US and around the world will join us, as they will see it as important to do this. Since we are New Yorkers, it starts with us here and the scoping plan in New York. I am a Sierra Club supporter and have been involved with the Sierra Club on and off since 1988. I live in Sunnyside, Queens. I'm worried about the future of our planet, which could become uninhabitable if climate change continues at the present rate. I hope that the people of the world will unite to stop this problem. It could be an awesome and magnificent thing if people could lead their governments to do the right thing, and it is possible. We still have just enough time.
Thank you for your comments. Vince?
Lucia Terry, Sierra Club.
We have the technology, the manpower, and the desire to deal with this problem today. Many people will suffer with the end of the fossil fuel era, but many more will die if we do not decide to act now and accept that the age of natural gas has already ended. The damage we have dealt to the planet is substantial. No longer can we question the science and deny the effects of what we have done in the name of humanity and in the name of God. The statistics are in. Today we set a record high of 412 parts per million carbon dioxide despite global commitments to reduce emissions. Since 1880, the Earth's temperature has risen 0.14 degrees Celsius each year, but for the past 40 years it has more than doubled to 0.32 degrees Celsius. There will be no divine intervention, no ticket to Mars to save us from ourselves. Accept reality. Accept that the loss of a job is vastly less important than the loss of an entire planet. The economic cost incurred by climate change will dwarf the cost of quitting crude oil. My horse in the race is you. Every life who will suffer if we do not commit now to recover nature, to restore God's green earth, which in turn will recover ourselves and take us then into the next epoch of human growth and discovery. I beseech you not to commit to a gasless future, but a gasless today. Embrace the change that has begun already and allow it to take you farther. Let nature show you the path to redemption. The way to reduce emissions is by restoration. If we act now, it is possible to become carbon negative. The power of nature is beyond human comprehension. We do not rule over it, but it over us. We must allow the planet to recover, trees to regrow, and consume the toxicity we have created. But this will never happen if we do not accept the need to change our behavior. So listen to me now. The longer you wait to act, the more harm you will have caused. The less we have to leave our children, and the more suffering we hand down to the coming generations. Act now. Decide to make a positive change. Choose the future of those who will come after you instead of your own. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph?
Joanna Altman Smith from Brooklyn, New York.
Good afternoon. My name's Joanna. I'm here to remind everyone on the council that New Yorkers are scared and we're tired. We're tired of all the talk. We're tired of all the stalling. We need action. We need it now. I, in particular, am very tired of hearing the industry representatives who are on the council on seats that they purchased through campaign donations, leading us down the path of destruction. They offer false solutions and they fearmonger. There are ways out of this if we all work together. I'm also tired of our governmental leaders and our business leaders ignoring the science, ignoring the basic facts around the climate emergency that we are currently in favor of more personal power and more profit. If I could, I would like to offer my allotted testimony to allow the earth to speak for herself, to remind us that we're in grave danger of overshooting our interconnected ecological ceiling. The earth speaks her own language, but she does not need translation services. She's being perfectly clear. She speaks in fires, she speaks in floods, she speaks in sea level rise, in tornadoes, in heat waves and droughts. She just needs us to listen, which is what I invite us to do together today, and to use our collective power and wisdom to realize that we are out of time for bold climate action. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Vince?
Hugh, Dietz, Brooklyn, New York.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Ellie Hugh Dietz, and I was born just outside of Syracuse, and I've lived in Brooklyn for 13 years. I'm a senior building systems consultant at Stephen Winter Associates. My firm is one of the leading experts in retrofitting existing buildings and designing new ones to make them healthier, more efficient, and cheaper to operate. I'm here today to support the strategies outlined in the draft scoping plan, particularly in the buildings chapter. Buildings are the largest source of our emissions in New York State, which means this is our biggest opportunity. At the moment, most of our buildings depend on fossil fuel infrastructure, which is expensive to build, expensive to maintain, takes up a lot of valuable land, it's dangerous, and thanks to heat pumps, they're unnecessary and obsolete. The alternative is a well-insulated, all-electric building. At Stephen Winter, we're seeing that young people want to work in this industry, and in fact, we cannot hire fast enough. But we need support. We need highly efficient building codes statewide, requirements that new space heating and hot water equipment be efficient and electric, better financing options, an energy efficiency performance standard for large buildings, and a comprehensive plan to end investments in gas infrastructure. Finally, I'm also here as a parent. I have a son who was born in 2020, which means that in 2050, when this plan is supposed to be completed, he'll be younger than I am now. As other parents keep telling me that time will fly by, we cannot wait to start implementing this plan. We have a chance to show the world that it's possible to bring a large economy to zero emissions and thereby bring hope to parents everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joseph, could I have group 4 line up behind Joseph, please?
Pramila Malik, Chair of Protect Orange County.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I just want to remind everybody that it's 111 degrees in India right now for days. So what happens here doesn't stay here. My county now powers New York City. Since the development of competitive power ventures, frack gas power plant built on bribes and lies, New York City consumes a third of all power produced in New York State, and New York City is the second largest consumer of power in the entire world, second only to Tokyo. As a major coastal city, it is also uniquely vulnerable to climate change, and hence New York City is both a climate culprit and a climate victim. And when we talk about community impacts from the decisions you will make, we're talking about my community, as Orange County now lies at the intersection of New York State's climate and energy policy. We are where the rubber meets the road, where the state's slick and deceptive rhetoric about climate meets reality. In 2014, as climate activists applauded New York State's fracking ban, our once pristine rural community was being systematically engulfed by noxious, toxic, climate-killing frack gas infrastructure. And while the gas industry, through CPV, colluded with state politicians and regulators to destroy our state's single largest source of carbon-free power, the Indian Point nuclear power plant, fake environmentalists were painting images of picturesque wind and solar farms as its replacement. This was a lie, and everyone except the wider public knew it was a lie. Those wind and solar farms were never built, and even if they could be, they could never replace the enormous, reliable, carbon-free power Indian Point provided. And though the truth was finally exposed in a criminal trial that the closure of Indian Point was the quid in an egregious quid pro quo bribery scheme, forged by CPV, New York State went ahead and closed it anyway, our single greatest asset in the fight against climate change that provided 80% of New York City's carbon-free power and 1,000 good-paying jobs. I'm almost done.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your comments. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Vince.
Kathleen McCarthy, New York, New York.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Kathleen McCarthy. I live in Manhattan.
Vince, please move forward.
Sorry. I live in Manhattan.
I'm
and I
sorry.
work in
I'm going to have to
Queens.
ask for some help in removing this woman, please. Please. Thank you very much. Vince?
Hi, my name is Kathleen McCarthy. I live in Manhattan and I work in Queens. I am trained as an ecologist, and my job is to restore damaged wetlands and forests in New York City parklands. I used precious vacation time to be at this meeting on time because we must aggressively pursue climate action and fully implement the CLCPA. The clear path to meeting our goals is by ending the use of fossil fuels and supporting energy efficiency. This means no new gas infrastructure and clear deadlines for phasing out existing fossil fuels. It is possible and will cost far less than the devastation caused by unabated climate change. I also want to point out a deficiency in the plan's statement on forest management and carbon sequestration. The plan only includes forest management that harvests trees on a cycle. This is old science. The current science is clear that allowing a mature forest, those 50 to 125 years old, to grow undisturbed sequesters far more carbon than any management that includes tree harvesting. Letting a forest grow undisturbed also supports the complex biodiversity in mature forests. Therefore, the plan needs to incorporate a new program with a goal of 5 million acres of private forests to be managed as forever wild forests for long-term carbon storage. This means no timber harvesting on a minimum of 5 acres, which includes small landowners. Additional goals should be set for the long-term storage of carbon in public forests. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your comments. Joseph.
Christopher Raup, Vice President, Energy Policy and Regulatory Affairs at Con Ed.
Con Edison and Orange and Rockland have served the New York City metro region for almost 200 years, providing electricity, gas, and steam to 5 million customers. Our core focus is on reliability and safety. Our electric system provides world-class reliability, and we have installed thousands of remotely monitored methane detectors in our gas territory to alert our gas control center of leaks inside homes or businesses. We also offer bill discounts to our most vulnerable customers, as well as targeted energy efficiency programs in disadvantaged communities. We will continue to develop these programs in alignment with CLCPA recommendations. We support achievement of the goals of CLCPA, and our clean energy commitment is our pledge to transform our business and meet those goals. The commitment has 5 pillars: building an electric grid to meet the growing demand for clean energy, empowering customers to adopt energy efficiency electric vehicles and heat pumps, substantially lowering the gas system's greenhouse gas impact, reaching net zero greenhouse gases at our own facilities by 2040, and partnering with stakeholders to achieve this transformation. We agree with many of the recommendations in the scoping plan. I'll address 4 aspects: reliability, gas transition, the customer's role, and the role of utilities. The scoping plan's focus on reliability is essential. We need to sequence actions so clean resources are integrated with existing supply resources in a way that does not negatively impact reliability. We see key actions that need to be taken to achieve the gas transition, including reducing fossil gas consumption, decarbonizing the gas we deliver, and addressing cost impacts of a smaller system while sustaining safety and reliability. Customer adoption of clean energy is fundamental to achieving CLCPA goals. For example, advancing transmission projects to facilitate the reduction of emissions in disadvantaged communities, and we can do more. We've run the numbers. Utility deployed renewables is least cost for our customers, and our affiliate is the 2nd largest provider of solar generation in North America. But we aren't allowed to bring that expertise to New York.
Thank you for your comments.
The state should authorize us to build renewables.
Thank you. Vince?
Hadia Shirazi, Program Manager, Carbon Management Research Initiative, Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University, CEPA.
Thank you to the Council for convening this hearing. I'm speaking here as a private individual. In addition to researching carbon and hydrogen, I also study the impacts of climate change, energy poverty, and natural disasters on the most vulnerable in our communities. My recommendation pertains to Chapter 21 of Adaptation and Resilience, specifically AR3 under Building Capacity, and AR5 and 7, which are on Communities and Infrastructure, which I believe is pages 313 to 316. Specifically, in Appendix H, the authors of the draft plan concede that New York has not committed substantial resources to comprehensive adaptation planning and coordination. This means that our early warning systems are not robust, and they have not yet been designed with the realities of New York in mind. Last year, Ida turned our roads into rivers, subways into swimming pools, and 13 residents drowned in flash floods in historic rainfall. The city and state still do not know the exact number of unofficial basement apartments in New York, nor how many of them actually lie currently in hurricane evacuation zones, and therefore are still at risk even during moderate storms. Add to that, we have many elderly New Yorkers and millions of people with disabilities that often choose to live on first floor or ground floor apartments that are already at high risk during extreme rainfall if they can't be evacuated without assistance. Incomplete data about these vulnerable groups leads to incomplete vulnerability assessments, which leads to inadequate early warning systems and leads to the kinds of text messages that advise New Yorkers to shelter in place instead of telling millions to flee for higher ground. We need to drastically upgrade these strategies to be disability inclusive, elder inclusive, and reflective of the realities of rent-burdened communities of color in New York. I've been a New Yorker since I was a teenager, and I know we can be more ambitious, more inclusive in the final draft. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Joseph.
Claire Raffel of New York, New York.
Hello, and thank you for this opportunity to testify today. My name is Claire Raffel, and I live in Harlem. I'm a mother of an 11-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 19-year-old. and I'm here today because I'm scared. Climate change and the enormous cost of inaction are going to leave all of our kids facing a future where we're spending all of our public dollars on recovery from climate disasters and not on the education, safe housing, healthy food, affordable health care, and quality of life that our children, our grandchildren, and our future generations deserve. Without these investments now, we're stealing our kids' futures, and that, frankly, is a crime. We must have a just transition. Environmental justice must come first. This means prioritizing our frontline communities, good jobs, workforce development, and strong public health guidelines. We need to reject false solutions. Instead, we need to focus on renewable zero-emission technologies like solar and wind. We must fund the CLCPA. A dedicated funding mechanism today will allow us to make this transition to an equitable, renewable energy economy. We need scenario 3 for clean air and a healthy economy, a rapid and large-scale transition away from fossil fuels. And finally, the CLCPA is a law, and we need to treat it like one. Provisions for environmental justice and reducing emissions don't mean anything if they can't be enforced. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Vince?
Wendy Fleischer, consultant at Wendy Fleischer Consultants.
Hi, thanks for being here. I'm going to ditch my prepared comments and just speak to you from the heart, as you all are probably bigger experts than I am. And I want to share with all the folks in this room that growing up and for all my life, I have looked up at the sky or looked out at the sea or walked in nature to get comfort from life's everyday worries. I have a son, and I'm afraid that he won't have those comforts from nature. I left a lot of work undone at my desk to come here to talk to you. Behind me, there are thousands more people who didn't come today because they're despairing. They've been lulled into apathy by the fact that our leaders are not stepping up, that they're not doing what we really know we need to do. We can't try half measures or false solutions anymore. I worked with New York Renews as they were developing the CLCPA. I know that these are caring people that put their energy into this work to make sure that workers are very much considered in the law. That the whole purpose of the law actually is to take care of our people in New York, to make sure that our futures are okay and that our children are okay. It's neither legal nor moral to disregard the spirit and the letter of that law. And I hope you will take that into account in making your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph.
Laura Maffei of Cedarhurst, New York.
Hi, thank you for listening to me today. My name is Laura Maffei, and I live on the South Shore of Long Island, where I taught high school for 16 years and saw the devastation caused by Superstorm Sandy to many of my students and their families. Their lives and their educations were disrupted when they had no heat or hot water, or when their homes were partially or totally destroyed. And just last year, the remnants of Hurricane Ida killed 11 people in Queens alone, which is also where some of my students are from. My question is, what are we waiting for? We need to set clear, specific yearly targets for replacing fossil fuels with renewable sources that are built for and by our communities. And we need a guarantee that these targets will be met using proven renewable energy technologies and not false solutions. We must reject false solutions that we already know don't work, because biofuel emissions take at least 5 decades to be reabsorbed, because so-called renewable natural gas is biomethane, which harms local environments, because biomass involves burning wood matter, which causes even more local air pollution than gas plants, because waste incineration causes cancer-causing air pollutants, because so-called green hydrogen is produced using fossil fuels, and because carbon capture exposes local communities to an increased risk of toxic emissions. The final scoping plan must reject false solutions and focus on renewable zero-emission technologies that have been proven to work and It must have a just transition for all workers. Thank you.
Thank you. Vince?
Philip Voss, Program Director, Energy Vision.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the draft scoping plan. Energy Vision is a 501c3 environmental organization. In 2019, New York's 11 million plus vehicles burned nearly 7 billion gallons of fossil fuels, accounting for 20% of greenhouse gas emissions. To reduce those emissions, we urge the Council to include a Clean Fuel Standard, or CFS, in its final scoping plan. Electrifying transportation is and should be a primary goal wherever possible. The draft plan calls for about 3 million ZEVs in New York by 2030. A CFS will provide an incentive structure that will give us a chance of reaching that goal from the 100,000 such vehicles we have now. Under California's low carbon fuel standard, on-road electric has grown over 200-fold since 2011, and the LCFS has generated over $1 billion for electrification just since 2019. But we can't just wait to hit our electrification targets. Looking again to California's LCFS, the majority of emissions reductions have come from biofuels as electrification has ramped up. Biofuels are a proven way to reduce emissions while we electrify transportation. Properly designed, a CFS will also encourage development of sustainable aviation fuels. Immediately slashing methane emissions has become a priority in tackling climate change. A CFS will encourage use of biomethane, which captures methane from organic wastes and turns it into low carbon or carbon negative energy. CFS critics have called it counter to the spirit of the CLCPA. That seems unlikely, as a primary goal of the act is to reduce emissions. CFS critics say it undermines environmental justice goals. New York CFS legislation has been amended in line with CLCPA, requiring 40% of credit values earned by electric utilities and state agencies to go to disadvantaged communities.
Thank you for your comments.
It is not a false solution.
Thank you for your comments. Joseph?
Mo Yang Tom of Jobs to Move America.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak on the Climate Action Council's draft scoping plan. I'm Marianne Tom, and I'm the New York Senior Researcher with Jobs to Move America. We're a strategic policy organization focusing on making sure our public investments do the most public good, creating quality jobs and healthier communities. While we appreciate the draft scoping plan discussing a just transition for impacted workers and communities, JMA is concerned about the lack of funding to accomplish these goals. New York must establish a dedicated funding mechanism by legislation, if necessary, to ensure reductions of greenhouse gas emissions while addressing the concerns of transitioning from a fossil fuel-based economy. With this dedicated funding, the state can achieve this large-scale transition to an equitable, renewable energy economy. In addition, this dedicated funding could create a worker and community assurance fund to provide direct support to fossil fuel-dependent workers across sectors, including wage replacement and pension support for displaced workers. This would also address the loss of these fossil fuel facilities in communities dependent on them as a tax base. JMA also supports the usage of a best value procurement process to make sure this dedicated funding grows a green economy with strong labor standards. This process would incentivize manufacturers to compete up through the bidding process with a commitment to good wages, benefits, training, and retraining opportunities, as well as the creation of joint labor management and apprenticeship programs. Community empowerment and worker empowerment must come first. This means prioritizing the jobs, health, and welfare of communities at the front line of the climate crisis. When it comes to creating the inclusive green economy of New York's future, the plan must include strong labor standards and dedicated funding. We want to make sure this transition to a green economy creates community-sustaining wages and benefits with equitable hiring and training practices that benefits all aspects of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Vince?
Emmett Mendoza from Gaspar, Representative Assembly Member Marcela Montañez.
Hi, my name is Emmett. I'm the organizing director for Assemblymember Marcela Montañez, who represents the District of Sunset Park, Red Hook, and Bay Ridge. I'm here today on behalf of the Assemblymember and her constituents we represent. As a district that is majority working class and of color, we're on the front lines of environmental crisis and are already seeing its effects. Hurricane Sandy hit almost 10 years ago now, and the neighborhoods of Red Hook, which is home to more than 6,090 tenants, is still seeing its effects today in forms of degraded infrastructure, gas leaks, and water main burst. We have some of the highest asthma rates in the city as well, a legacy that has stems from historic redlining that has followed immigrant and working class communities in areas that are right next to the industrial waterfront in the BQE. We need a roadmap to zero emissions by 2040, or before, hopefully. Legislation does not just mean setting a goal. It also means providing that we have the necessary resources and a plan to get there. We know that we have the resources in the state, but we need to finally accept that economic development does not just mean lower taxes and employment. It also means providing an environment where our communities, especially our marginalized working communities of color, can live healthful lives as well as contribute to their talents. We can afford to provide these resources by both taxing the rich, but also making sure that everyone is able to benefit from it. We know that the private sector alone cannot get us there. For the rapid, large-scale transitions to renewables that we need to unleash the power of the state and our community resources must be enacted through the passage of the Build Public Renewables Act in order to implement the CLCPA that we need. In our district, Red Hook, we have seen at least 5 last mile trucking facilities, and in Sunset Park, 1 that have popped up as a course of the pandemic. This will only add additional fuel emissions and further concentrating negative environmental impacts in frontline communities. We must regulate this industry as well. Our office has enacted an indirect source rule to help address this. We also support option 3 in the CLCPA. Yeah.
Thank you for your comments. Would Group 5 please make their way behind Vince? Thank you. Joseph?
Alexander Dillon of Cedarhurst, New York.
My name is Alex Dillon, and I'm a deeply regretful and daily contributor to GHG emissions. From when I take a hot shower in the morning and boil my coffee and hop on the train to work. And I'm a disposer of waste. And I know the waste I throw out gets taken far from where I live, in my privileged, mostly white community, and goes to landfills where it leaks methane gas and contributes to asthma, lung diseases, and cancers for the frontline, impoverished, and communities of color who live there. And it makes it no better if that waste is incinerated as part of the energy transition we need to be making. Now, the scoping plan's a remarkable document, but waste incineration is just one of the false solutions it must eliminate, along with biofuels, which continue to emit GHGs, renewable natural gas, which is actually dirty methane gas no matter where it comes from, and unproven carbon capture. The scoping plan needs to focus on methods that work and are already underway, solar and wind. And it needs to support the state's full electrification so that consumers like me who want and can afford to stop emitting GHG once and for all can actually do it. Look, I want to buy an all-electric vehicle. There's no place in my community to charge it. Meanwhile, Norway has over 60% electric vehicles and are eliminating internal combustion vehicles within the next 3 years. What are we, a third world country? Come on, New York State. We can do better than we're doing. The carbon emissions era is ending. The renewable energy era is here. Now's the time for courage, not cowardice. Looking forward, not back. Adopt scenario 3. Eliminate all GHG emitting fuel, whether from underground or from burning trash. Electrify the grid, electrify transportation, electrify all buildings. Create a green labor force and programs to help fossil fuel industry workers transition into it. Create a permanent funding mechanism to make this happen. And strike the health-destroying and backwards-looking false solutions out of the scoping plan once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I just wanted to say we are an hour in. We're moving pretty quickly, but the likelihood is we may not get to everyone who is registered to speak. There are other ways to submit your comments on the slide. We'll do the best that we can, but we have a hard stop at 8 o'clock for this venue. Vince.
Gilbert Sabater.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Gilbert Sabater. I am an entrepreneur. I'm here because I am ashamed and I'm angry. I'm ashamed and angry because it's taking us to a crisis situation to move ahead with the environment. I remember in the 50s when our national debt was in the billions of dollars, $300 billion. I remember we didn't have any climate crisis as we have today. In the 70s, we tried to raise money for solar panels. Nobody was interested. We then tried to raise funds for the Stirling engine, which only needs heat, the sun, to make it work. Nobody was interested. It wasn't until now that we are thinking about doing something about in New York State, not in the country. My 435 gutless wonders in Washington are not discussing the environment. They're not discussing the $30 trillion debt that we have today. So, New York, we have to take the bull by the horns and start doing something about the environment in our state and in our city. So maybe the world, especially Washington, will take us as an example of what they can do if they really have the will. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph?
Jeff Levy Lyons, Jewish Climate Action Network, New York City.
Thank you for this chance to speak with you. Justice, justice, you shall pursue. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 20. You have in your hands a transformative piece of legislation that is now the law in New York State. It has become a model for the country and for the world on how to make addressing the climate crisis happen at scale. But it does more than that. It serves as a moral compass for how to make rapid, desperately needed changes in a way that considers both our most disadvantaged communities and the workers who now, out of necessity, are being asked to redeploy their skills to become the new frontline workers to help us meet the enormous challenge of this great crisis. 30 years ago, we had the luxury of making the transition away from fossil fuels a gradual, smooth ride. We no longer have that luxury. 30 years of vested interests using lies to protect their profits robbed us of that time. And sadly, we are here in 2022 facing the same headwinds of greed and self-interest now playing out as misinformation, false solutions, and distractions. As a person of faith, bearing witness to the great suffering already being caused by this crisis, and as a father deeply concerned for the world I'm passing along to my children, I find this obstructionist behavior morally outrageous. And so I say to you all, for the love of God, literally, make it your job, make it your mission to strengthen the CLCPA in every possible way. Justice demands nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Vince?
Michael Magazine from New York Renew's Youth Committee.
I'm here as a member of the youngest generation and an advocate for the generations yet to be born, asserting the obligation this council and this scoping plan have to the youth of today and tomorrow. We might be 20% of today's population in this state, but we're 100% of the future of this planet. As I and many my age look to see who's dominating the discussions of climate change, we see that those who hold the power to make decisions on climate policy are individuals such as yourselves, members of an antiquated America attached to conserving traditional industry. Change to your generations often means instability, false promises, and the potential for failure. Some have come out against progressive provisions that call for a robust restructuring of our industries for that very reason. To my generation, instability, false promises, and failure is not found in change, it's found in traditionalism. For the sake of sustainability, the biggest tool for damage mitigation of climate and environmental catastrophes, change is something we all must come to terms with and work together in creating an equitable and just change that ensures nobody is unwillingly left in the remnants of fossil fuel reliance and haphazardness, and no minority population is pushed to the wayside or trampled upon. We have to put our money where our mouths are and fully fund the CLCPA. I'm too young to vote, but old enough to know the weight this plan holds. As much as this plan is for the many workers of today, it is also for the leaders of the future. Kids will grow up in a world these provisions will create. Do you want that world, a reality you might not live to experience, to be filled with disasters and strife that this plan, these provisions can prevent? Should the entirety of our future be jeopardized and debated by those who won't see the sun rise on a ruined world? Change must be guaranteed, and a green, clean, and bright future must be as well.
Thank you for your comment. Joseph.
Jeffrey Corder, interim pastor, First Presbyterian Church of Forest Hills, New York.
I am here. Can you hear me? Can you hold that up more? Thank you. I'm here as a person of faith to say that climate change is a moral issue. I'm happy to speak after my brother, Jeffrey Lyons, who brings that from the Jewish perspective, and we are united in our concern. In Forest Hills, I live a mile from where somebody drowned in a basement because of Hurricane Ida. There's a human cost to this. If we were to stop using fossil fuels today, the Earth would still get warmer. The cumulative effects go on. You know this. This is your expertise. But this is something that we can and must do something about. Not just here in this place where people at the bottom are most impacted, but people around the world are impacted by what you do here in the state of New York with this population. We can lead, we can show that moral leadership, or we can cave into economic interests. And that's exactly what it is, caving to economic interests. How much is a human life worth? I ask you that, and I challenge you. Do everything you can to fund this CLCPA and to get off of fossil fuels as immediately as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Could Group 6 make their way down behind Joseph, please? Group 6. Vince?
Mark Weiss, a steering committee member from New York Renews.
So this is going to be a little bit unconventional. I mainly want to address my union sisters and brothers in the room today. But I'm going to start by saying I'm here because I'm the father of a daughter and a son in their 20s who will have to cope. Okay, but I am speaking to...
Thank you.
So my daughter and my son are in their 20s, and they're going to have to cope with the floods and the heat waves and the escalating climate impacts for the rest of their lives. I'm here to support vigorous implementation of the climate law to protect my kids and grandkids and to protect the children in the lives of everyone in this room. New York State, the world's 11th largest economy, can be a model for the country and the world on how to do it right. As I said, I really want to address my union sisters and brothers. I have a long personal history with the labor movement. My dad organized the local of liquor store workers in Pittsburgh in the 1930s, and he was a lifelong union member. I've been a member of 2 unions myself, and I worked with multiple internationals and locals in the 70s and 80s. The labor movement created the middle class in this country and made sure that workers' health and safety are protected. But it took decades of organizing, and the bosses fought every step of the way. As we can see from what's happening with Amazon workers right now, the company will spend enormous amounts of money and will lie and cheat if they can get away with it to protect their profits above the well-being of the people who work for them.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you.
I didn't get to my main point. I just want to say...
I'm sorry. Your 2 minutes are up, but thank you very much for your comments. You can submit them in writing. Joseph.
Eric Dawson, Nuclear, New York.
Hi, my name is Eric Dawson on behalf of Nuclear New York. Today, we're talking about the CAC scoping plan based on the Climate Leadership and Protection Act of 2019, the CLCPA. The main goal, as seen on the official CLCPA fact sheet, is, quote, by 2040, achieve 100% zero-emission electricity. The key phrase is zero-emission electricity. Very simply, the primary goal of the CLCPA is to dramatically increase zero-emission electricity, but the specific method of achieving that goal should be irrelevant and technology neutral. Nuclear power is the most reliable, efficient, land-conserving, and most importantly, scalable source of zero-emission electricity. And as I see it, there are two categories of technology. Technology that works today and technology that might work in the future. There's nothing wrong with investing money in R&D and technology that might work to improve long-term battery storage, solar panels, and wind turbines, as well as potentially carbon capture and sequestration or hydrogen fuel cells. But all that cannot help us scale up reliable zero-emission electricity to the level we need today. Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant was prematurely shut down last year, even though it provided the vast majority of downstate New York's zero-emission electricity. This loss of clean nuclear power resulted in no discernible benefits, but many quantifiable harms, including the loss of 1,000 clean jobs in a small town along the Hudson River, Buchanan, New York, as well as the increased use of fossil fuels. Now, if all this was in the interest of achieving the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, how exactly does the increase of fossil fuels help the climate and the loss of 1,000 jobs help the community? Nuclear has the highest union membership of any utility industry and the highest median wage of any utility industry as well. In the towns where nuclear plants live, they provide an economic base resulting in clean jobs, tax revenue, and local charity donations, all without generating any air pollution. My criticism of the scoping plan is simply that it overestimates the benefits of renewables and underestimates the benefits of nuclear. We still have three functioning power plants in upstate New York.
Vince?
Jackie Weisberg, 350 Brooklyn.
Some facts. Suicides among the young is a serious problem. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for children, adolescents, and young adults at age 15 to 24. Research has concluded that up to 21,000 additional suicides will occur by 2050 within the US and Mexico if unmitigated climate change continues to warm the Earth at the current projected rates. Recent research has linked elevated temperatures to an increase in violence, stress, and decreased cognitive function, leading to impacts such as reduced test scores, lower worker productivity, and impaired decision-making. The CAC put forth 3 scenarios for our climate future. I support scenario 3. The scoping plan must ensure that the mandates put forth by the CAC are legally enforceable against industries and include timelines for the reduction of emissions by sector. Provisions for environmental justice and emission reduction mean nothing if they cannot be enforced or if there aren't rules in place for what happens when our climate justice laws are broken. It's vital that the final scoping plan reject false solutions to the climate crisis like biofuels, renewable natural gas, biomass, waste incineration, and, quote, green hydrogen. It must focus on renewable zero emission technology that have proven to work like solar and wind technologies. New York must lead the nation by strong, brave, progressive transformational laws, and the mandates in the CLCPA must be funded by fossil fuel companies. In order to reach a zero-emission power sector by 2040, New York needs a rapid, large-scale transition away from fossil fuels. I live in terror that my little grandchild will one day be one of the horrific suicide statistics. Aren't you terrified?
Thank you for your comments. Could Group 7 start making their way down to behind Vince, please? Group 7. Joseph?
Bryn Fuller Becker, Communications Coordinator for New Yorkers for Clean Power.
Hi, my name is Bryn Fuller Becker. I'm a Brooklyn resident, a climate activist, and I serve as a communications coordinator with New Yorkers for Clean Power. I'm here today on behalf of Electrify New York, a statewide coalition made up of advocates for environmental justice, clean and expanded public transportation, social justice, and good jobs. Overall, New Yorkers for Clean Power and Electrify New York strongly support the draft scoping plan's vision. New York needs a strong plan to respond to the climate emergency by shifting off of fossil fuels and achieving the goals of the Climate Act. All electric solutions to replace fossil fuels in transportation powered by a renewable grid is the most efficient and realistic pathway to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. With this in mind, Electrify New York feels that the plan must include creative approaches to prioritizing emission reductions in disadvantaged communities, including plans to deploy charging infrastructure in underserved areas, redirecting explicit workforce development and protections for existing workers, and identification and phasing out of diesel vehicles where they most negatively impact public health. Finally, a major expansion of zero emissions public transit fleets is needed in the state, again, with significant and realistic funding to support this effort. We feel that the inclusion of Electrify New York legislative package, including green transit, green jobs, into the scoping plan will allow New York to meet its CLCPA goals and avoid the most harmful effects of the climate crisis while improving the health and preserving the jobs of all New Yorkers. Finally, I'd like to say, not as representative of any group or coalition, but as an individual, the young residents of New York are not going anywhere. We are organized, we are passionate, we are energetic, and we are quite literally fighting for our lives. And not only our lives are the lives that get the most resources, funds, and airtime, but the lives of the underserved groups that literally built this city. In short, I'm here, I'm an active voter, I'm listening, and I look forward to working with you all and holding you accountable to your promises. Thank you.
Vince?
James Niemeister, representative of Councilmember Alexa Aviles.
Good afternoon, everyone. When the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act was passed in 2019, the bill was lauded for centering equity and climate justice. That's what I want to talk about. So we're here today to reiterate that we cannot allow Black, brown, and climate-impacted communities across our state to be left behind. We have seen how environmental burdens have impacted the health and well-being of our neighbors. Sunset Park, which Councilmember represents, once is home to 3 peaker plants. Currently, it's home to a lot of this last mile. Amazon delivery trucks are everywhere because we're right by the BQE and all these other things. So, you know, we have an opportunity to build new structures and to invest, and that's what we need is the money, right? So we need money to carry out this transition. And I want to stress that we need a just transition away from fossil fuels without delay. That means our state's climate action plan has to choose the most ambitious emissions reduction scenario without extending the lifespan of fossil fuel infrastructure. No matter how much we're told that these could be low carbon, we have deep concerns that this is an attempt to, expand the lifeline of infrastructure. And I want to emphasize we have the tools we need to succeed. So there's room in this plan to lead the way towards rapidly decarbonizing our transportation system, not only making our cities and neighborhoods more walkable, right, but funding things like the MTA. There's room in this plan to implement bold food policy. There's room in the plan for all our best ideas, including a moratorium on new fossil fuel plants, all electric new construction, and retrofits that will make our homes safer and give people in our neighborhood jobs, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph?
Rachel Landsberg from Dayanu, a Jewish call to climate action.
Hi, my name is Rachel Landsberg. I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I'm a mother, a Jewish educator, a leader of faith, and a proud New Yorker. A Jewish tale from the Talmud relates the story of a wise man named Choni, encountered a man planting a carob tree. Choni asked the man, "How long will it take for this tree to bear fruit?" The man replied, 70 years. Choni then asked, "Do you think you will live another 70 years?" The man answered, "Perhaps not. However, when I was born into this world, I found many carob trees planted by my parents and grandparents. Just as they planted trees for me, I am planting trees for my children and grandchildren, so they will be able to eat the fruit of these trees. I am here as a faith leader to be sure that we continue to plant carob trees for our children's children. We can be proud of our truly historic work passing the CLCPA, the most forward-looking progressive climate legislation in the country, designed to pave the way for a sustainable future for all of New York's children. Now we need to take the next step and be sure that the CLCPA is implemented based on real, sustainable, forward-thinking solutions that safeguard the lives, health, and rights of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income communities that are being hit first and worst by environmental racism and climate change. We need to push back against false energy solutions. Waste to energy ignores the impact of local pollution caused from the burning of waste to create energy, and we're perpetuating New York's legacy of burdening low-income communities and communities of color with cancer-causing hazardous air pollutants. Biomethane would add to methane leakage, serious warming effects, and local environment health harms. These examples of false solutions would move us backward, not forward. Please heed the advice of the elder in our story. Thank you.
Your comments. Could Group 8 please make their way down behind Joseph? Group 8. Vince?
Policy Director, Alliance for a Green Economy.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment today on the efforts to develop an implementation plan for the CLCPA. We need a well-thought-out transition away from fossil fuels in order to reap the full societal benefits of a renewable economy. For example, the Just Transition Working Group found that total employment from green jobs could increase by more than 211,000 new jobs by 2030. However, beyond simple employment, we must ensure that these jobs are good union jobs that come with prevailing wage standards, funds for displaced worker retraining and apprenticeship programs, and equitable hiring practices to ensure the state reaches communities typically underserved by energy sector jobs. Developing this plan in advance will allow for the state to include these important provisions that impacted communities have been speaking and writing in support of. We want to call attention to the mention of specific fuels in the draft scoping plan, including hydrogen and so-called renewable natural gas. These will only set us back and delay a transition away from gas. Producing vast amounts of green hydrogen to feed into the gas distribution system for heating is an inefficient use of renewable energy and is not a cost-effective or viable solution. Renewable natural gas, which is actually just biomethane, is a pipe dream. There is not enough RNG to serve New York's needs, and piping it into our homes would introduce new methane leaks. Finally, we must start planning now for the remaining nuclear plants in New York to close at their license expiration dates. These facilities are old and expensive. By the time the first two close in 2029, New Yorkers will have paid over $7.6 billion through our energy bills to keep the upstate nuclear plants open. Given all of this, we are very supportive of recommendations to improve building codes and appliance efficiency, to require new construction to be done with no fossil fuel systems, and to change utility regulations to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies. There are currently 3 bills that are being discussed by the Senate and Assembly that would do just this, and we hope the legislature will listen to the recommendations from the CAC and pass them without further delay. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph?
Francis Menton of New York, New York.
Thank you. My name is Francis Menton. I'm a private citizen. I live in Manhattan. I have 2 children and 2 grandchildren. I feel like I am in the crowd that's come to observe the grand procession where the emperor unveils his new clothes. I hate to tell the people here and the people on the panel, but unfortunately the emperor has no clothes. He is completely naked. Am I the only one who sees this? 100% carbon-free electricity or energy in New York is not different from the emperor's new clothes. It's a complete and ridiculous fantasy. I'm going to quickly address 3 things: energy storage, hydrogen, and the global context. Energy storage. Your energy scoping plan contains no competent calculation of how much energy storage it would take to back up a wind and solar system. Competent calculation shows that it would be on the order of at least 10,000 gigawatt hours per year. You don't even have the unit of gigawatt hours in the whole calculation. It would cost, to buy that kind of storage would cost more than New York's entire GDP. And you're talking about tripling the amount of electricity consumption, so it would cost 3 times New York GDP. You don't know what you're doing. Can you do a competent calculation? And if you do a competent calculation, you will see that this cannot possibly work. Hydrogen is no better. To make green hydrogen means you have to, when you put in those electrodes, it takes 3 times as much energy as you get back. To use hydrogen, and hydrogen is a gas that is worse in every way than natural gas. It's more explosive, it's more corrosive, it's less energy dense. that will multiply our bills by a factor of 5 or 10. That's not going to happen either. And I just want to talk briefly about the global context. New York's entire energy system is on the order of about 40 gigawatts of capacity. China is building 47 gigawatts of coal power plants this year, and they have another 100 in line, 100 gigawatts for the next 2 years. And India is planning 1,000 gigawatts, 1,000 gigawatts of electric power, of coal power. Coal power. This is a complete nonsense. The emperor has no clothes. Please stop it.
Vince?
Brooklyn resident.
What's that? For more than 5 decades, scientists have warned that burning gas and fossil fuels has so dramatically damaged the Earth's atmosphere that all life forms are at risk of extinction. Government has been completely derelict in their duty to lead, commit resources, and invest in the many solutions that give us a fighting chance to avoid the massive destruction, loss of life, mass migration, and suffering climate chaos will bring. The CLCPA is an exception. It's a realistic statewide plan for a just transition to a carbon-neutral economy with the potential to be a model of how this can be achieved on a national scale. Given this extraordinary opportunity, I urge that the draft scoping plan fund the CLCPA. The legislation is meaningless without the dedicated financing to implement the changes across the economy that is required. We know the investments now will be cheap compared to the estimated $2 trillion a year of expected annual costs for climate impacts. The CLCPA is the law, and we know there is nothing more corrosive to societal cohesion than the overt flouting of the law. This is why the scoping plan must ensure that the mandates put forth by the Climate Action Council are legally enforced against industries to ensure the reduction of emissions sector by sector. And speaking most of all to our brothers and sisters of the trade union movement here today, the CLCPA must not only realize the statewide gain of up to 189,000 jobs in just the next 10 years, it must also require prevailing wage, benefits, and local higher labor standards, and incentivize good green jobs along the supply chain in New York, and fund career training for those whose industries are transformed by this transition.
Your comments. Joseph?
Aaron Chu, Vice President, Gas Field Operations at National Grid.
Good afternoon. National Grid currently operates an electric and gas network throughout New York State that serves 4.2 million customers, including 1.3 million here in New York City. New York's climate law is among the most ambitious in the world, and National Grid is committed to doing our part to achieve a clean energy future in New York. We're investing millions in wind, solar, and battery storage, in addition to electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Solving climate change requires sweeping changes to how we generate electricity, fuel vehicles, and heat our homes. However, utilities and the state also must ensure safe, reliable, and affordable energy. Electrification will be key in meeting climate goals, to be sure, but the enormous challenge in front of us demands a range of practical and cost-effective solutions. Today, nearly 90% of electricity used in New York City is generated with natural gas. On the coldest winter day, the gas network delivers 3 times the energy that the electric network delivers on the hottest summer day. Reliably decarbonizing the current electric system, let alone the increased load of a more electrified future, will take more than just building more renewable projects. There is a better way to achieve CLCPA goals that does not bet the city's future on a single solution. National Grid recently launched our vision to eliminate fossil fuels from our gas networks. That vision is rooted in supporting our customers and communities with an energy transition where no one is left behind. Some think we should shut down all existing gas heating infrastructure. We disagree. Rather than remove gas lines and force customers to buy all new appliances, the heating equipment, we can use fossil-free fuels like renewable natural gas and green hydrogen instead, technologies that exist today, along with a trained and skilled workforce that can be skilled to meet the needs of millions of customers who rely on natural gas. In the near term, renewable energy networks are critical to enabling the clean energy transition. And going forward, the Climate Action Council should consider a pathway that uses existing networks and recommend an adoption of renewable fuel standards to support fossil-free gas in New York. Thank you.
Thank you. Vince?
Vice Development Manager, AES.
In New York, AES has over 80 employees with office locations in Northern New York, Western New York, and New York City. We currently operate 809 megawatts of reliable, safe, and clean wind and solar power and are developing 2 gigawatts of solar and standalone storage at the community and utility scale. AES supports the provisions in the draft Climate Action Plan that support and enable development of wind and solar power and other renewable electricity technologies. While my comments will focus on the electricity sector, I would like to convey AES's support for the recommendations focused on energy efficiency improvements and decarbonization for buildings, transportation, electrification as well. We strongly support the fundamental component of an objective of the Climate Act to ensure New York's transition to a low-carbon economy results in beneficial outcomes for traditionally underserved communities. We agree with the draft scoping plan that the state should continue engagement, outreach, education, and support for local municipalities, communities, and residents to increase awareness and improve acceptance of energy delivery projects. I am proud that AES prioritizes local stakeholder engagement and bring comprehensive benefits to communities where we are developing and operating projects. I must also highlight for the Climate Action Council that to achieve 70% by 2030 mandate, New York needs to advance a significant number of wind, solar, and battery projects into construction. There are many ways the state can support the goal of getting projects built. By continuing procurement of aggressive schedule of at least 4,500 gigawatt hours per year from 2022 through 2026. By ORES continuing to improve and streamline the permitting process for cost-effective, timely, and environmentally responsible siting renewable energy projects while ensuring significant benefits to local communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph?
Judith K. Canepa, Rockaway's Outreach Coordinator, Sane Energy Project.
Yes, I want to point out that I lived through Superstorm Sandy. So I speak not just for myself, but for the people in my community. As we make this transition to clean, renewable, and sustainable energy based on beneficial electrification, greater efficiency, battery storage, heat pumps, and convection ovens, it must be made affordable to all. No longer should the burden of fattening the purses of utility investors and stock market speculators be laid on those who can least afford it, as others can afford to make the switch to the heat pumps and the ovens. We must prioritize the health of those communities who have suffered from the increased asthma and other respiratory diseases and cancers that they've been exposed to. We must do the work, the kind of work that was done in World War II. This country managed to do that 80 years ago by changing the face of industry and labor and providing training, and we must be providing training and well-paying jobs to our workers who've been laying the pipes and doing all the other work of the fossil fuel industry. We must find common ground with our unions and work together to make this just transition happen. We must fight the schism that the fossil fuel companies have instilled between us and workers. We must train and hire from the frontline communities people of low income, people of color who have already paid the price exacted upon them by the fossil fuel industry. And we must work to the future, move to the future together. Although the American Gas Association and the American Public Gas Association have blitzed legislators with alternative facts and deliberate lies about how the grid can't handle all the electrification, how Americans love their gas, all that sort of stuff, New York must set the record straight and lay the roadmap for how to do it the right way. Thank you.
Marjorie Cooper, Congregation Beth Elohim.
Lador Vador, which means from generation to generation, is a central tenet of Judaism. We're reminded in our prayers that our actions have an impact on every generation that follows. And not just generations of Jews, but people of every religion from every corner of the planet. I am a member of Congregation Beth Elohim's Dayenu Circle in Park Slope, where we advocate for climate legislation and educate others about the climate crisis. We begin each meeting by telling our stories, sharing with each other our reasons for being involved in climate work. There's an elementary school teacher who worries about the high rates of asthma among his students who live in the shadow of the BQE. There's the mother on Eastern Parkway who has to explain to her 4-year-old daughter why they are crammed into a closet as tornado warnings blast over her phone. And the parents whose children are traumatized from images of flooded subways, scorching wildfires, and sea animals choking on plastic waste. Or for me, conversations with my daughter and her friends who debate whether it's responsible to bring children into a world where the future is so uncertain. So that's our legacy: fear, sickness, hopelessness. Climate change, a devastating threat of our own doing. Yet we can limit the impact of our actions if we act immediately, and that means today. And that's why we need to make sure that the goals of the CLCPA are met and followed. Lador Vador, from generation to generation, let's leave a legacy free from fear, one that is filled with wellness and hope. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Joseph?
Anthony Rogers Wright, Director of Environmental Justice, New York Lawyers for the Public Interest.
Commissioner, Madam President, thank you so much. Great to see you again and to work by this group. I want to say straight up that New York is a labor city. When Amazon came here and announced that they were going to try to make H-2 non-labor jobs, we sent them on their way faster than the New York Giants sent Joe Judge on his way when he failed this city as well. We have to implement a just transition, but we cannot allow organizations or corporations like National Grid to ensorcel, inculcate, or bamboozle our family at labor with false solutions like green unicorn hydrogen, blue hydrogen, carbon capture sequestration. Those are not the jobs of the future. If we really want to help our sisters and brothers and friends at labor, the Climate Action Council must also recommend implementation and passage of the Climate Community and Investment Act so that we can really take care of these people and make sure that their benefits, their entitlements, their pensions, and their training is 100% paid for to the jobs of the real future. Because we damn well know that we don't just need a transition, we need a just transition to make sure that these fine people in red shirts and blue shirts in the back are taken care of. There will never be climate justice without justice for our workers. We don't leave our workers behind. So that being said, please do not allow our CLCPA to be tainted with these false solutions, these fossil food solutions that are fossil fooling our sisters, brothers, and friends in labor. Come back to us and make it be known plain that we are going to take care of them. We are never going to leave them behind like National Grid's going to leave them behind, and like so-called New Yorkers for Affordable Energy are going to leave them behind. New York Renews created a bill for y'all, CCIA, Climate Community Investment Act, rooted in just transition and indigenous, black, brown, and poor principles. I just want to say one more time, labor, we love you. We're not going to leave you behind. We are with you. Do not get fooled. They do not love you like we do. Stick with us or they're going to leave you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Vince?
Castillo, Manager of Green Light District, El Puente de Williamsburg.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Daniela Castillo. I'm part of the El Puente team and community in North Brooklyn. Thank you for the time and opportunity to speak today. During the times at which this immensity of the climate crisis weighs heavily on many of our hearts, there's no denying that the brunt of extractive harmful systems and the subsequent extreme weather events have impacted and continue to impact low-income communities and communities of color. Though we're speaking on the decisions made here in New York State, we are interconnected in the ways in which we share the same planet and feel the impacts of this crisis. From my abuelita's home that was flooded and lost in Mexico, to my parents' home that froze over in Houston, to my home here in Bushwick that flooded after Hurricane Ida. It brought water into our homes. This is a chance for New York State to truly be ambitious, to set standards for the rest of the country. I would like to recognize the magnitude of this moment in gathering to speak on the draft scoping plan. I'm here today with New York Renews, other climate and environmental organizations, activists, concerned and visionary residents and allies to support and demand that the CLCPA implementation be approached with an intersectional lens, prioritizing environmental justice measures and clear pathways towards real, equitable, sustainable solutions for all workers and communities. I'm here representing El Puente, a 40-year-old human rights institution that promotes leadership for peace and justice in the south side of Williamsburg, Bushwick, and also Puerto Rico. The communities such as Los Sures and Williamsburg, harmful transportation infrastructure like the BQE have resulted in extreme congestion and high levels of asthma. It's these communities that have been victim to inequitable planning that have the visions and solutions for sustainability and resilience. And it's these that are most impacted that should be prioritized to ensure a just transition. And it's time to step up and draw clear pathways towards implementation. We must work towards zero emissions, but also the improvement of our health, the health of our communities, our environment, and sustainable, just, equitable systems. Seeing that these sectors are deeply connected, we demand quality public housing investments in the face of this growing displacement crisis.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph?
Sam Wade, Director of Public Policy, Coalition for Renewable Natural Gas.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be with you today. My name is Sam Wade. I'm the Director of Public Policy for our coalition, and we're a national trade association for the RNG industry. We're a relatively new part of the overall renewable energy economy, but we've grown quickly as a result of important public policies throughout the country that have promoted RNG as a method of reducing methane. And the fact is, RNG projects do reduce methane emissions. They do not increase methane emissions. Ask the IPCC, ask US EPA, ask the Department of Energy. These are recognized experts that will tell you the facts about RNG. It is an effective complement to other technologies, including electrification and energy efficiency. And as our union friends here know, you cannot solve every problem with one tool. You have to use all the tools in the toolbox. And essentially, that's what RNG is. It's another tool that you need to be thinking about seriously as you complete the final plan. We believe that focused standards, such as the Clean Energy Standard in New York, have proven that they work. That has driven significant renewable power development, and we need similar policies on the gas side and on the transportation fuel side. Renewable natural gas procurement standards by utilities on the gas side, and clean fuel standards or low carbon fuel standards on the vehicle side. That is the way to get to success, and it does not prevent you from going as aggressively as possible with electrification. These things are complements. They are not at odds with each other. This New York dialogue is unique to New York right now. I think that's something unique New York, right? That's the saying. It is spreading, though, and you have a chance to change this if you wish to. If you want to show that we are part of a broad solution that other states can take up and move on quickly, you have to include all real-world technologies that reduce emissions. So thanks for the chance to be with you today. And on behalf of our over 350 members, we really hope you make the right choice. Thanks.
Thank you. Vince?
Peter Lehner, Managing Attorney, Sustainable Food, Farming, Earth Justice.
Thank you. You're hearing a lot tonight about transitioning off of fossil fuels. All true. I'd like to remind you not to forget the importance of transitioning our agriculture system. If we don't significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions from our own food system, we won't achieve our climate goals. The integration analysis indicates that agriculture is responsible for 6% of New York's greenhouse gas emissions. But this figure leaves out many aspects of the food system, including the impacts of fuel, electricity, chemicals used on farm, land use changes, and prior land use changes, and of course, food imported. When we fail to recognize the true magnitude of the sector's impact on climate change, we miss the opportunity this sector presents. Most of the emissions, agricultural emissions, are from livestock. We may have in our mind's eye the many small dairies scattered around the state. Yet most of the emissions come from a very small number of very large industrial-scale dairies, often with thousands of cows. The state should, of course, help these and all farmers transition to more climate-friendly practices. Yet for the largest 5 or 10% of dairies, the state should also use its regulatory mandates so they contribute to the cost, just as the state does with every other polluting industry in the state. The State Environmental Agency has ample authority to do so, and nothing in the CLCPA can be read to suggest otherwise. Saving the state's money to provide financial incentives to smaller scale facilities will be both more fair and better support our rural communities. On behalf of New York City, I brought one of the very first climate change lawsuits in 1988. Imagine if we had started working on a clean energy transformation then. Let's not look back 30 years from now with regret. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph?
Julia Morgan Canales, intern, Environmental Advocates, New York.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Julia Morgan Canales, and I'm a 17-year-old high school student in New York City and a current intern at Environmental Advocates NY. The ongoing climate crisis is one of the biggest health, social, and economic threats of the century, and a constant presence of fear and worry for my generation. My peers and I are still too young to vote, but it is our future that is at stake, so therefore I'm here today to share my comments on the draft scoping plan. I would firstly like to express my support for Scenario 3 in the plan, which pushes hardest on electrification as a strategy and uses the lowest levels of bioenergy and combustion, but there are other factors to take into consideration. By 2040, New York State is required to reach a zero-emissions electric grid. The final scoping plan must avoid false solutions that will perpetuate the combustion of fuels to generate electricity. 2040 is a date that sometimes appears to be far away, but by 2040, I will only be 36 years old, and I hope to live in a city run on safe and reliable zero-emission energy, not a city paying the consequences for using false solutions. It is essential that these deadlines are met and taken seriously, so New York's youth and future generations can have the long, healthy, and safe future that we all deserve. I urge you to stand firm on your commitment to a clean, just, and equitable New York, to please keep your children and grandchildren's future in mind. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Vince?
Renewable Energy Democracy Coordinator, Uprose.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Summer Sandoval, and I'm the Energy Democracy Coordinator at Uprose. I'm here today also as a resident of Brooklyn and to express the urgency and necessity of funding the CLCPA in Scenario 3 and prioritize direct investments into disadvantaged communities like Sunset Park to operationalize community-led climate solutions that support community ownership and builds real and long-term community wealth, creates accessible, well-paying local green jobs, all while protecting the health and well-being of historically marginalized communities in the face of climate change and other threats and disruptions like the COVID-19 pandemic. An equitable energy system requires large public and private investments that support community-led and community-owned clean energy projects like Sunset Park Solar and developing battery storage projects to replace polluting fossil fuel burning plants in environmental justice communities. Communities that are most impacted by fossil fuel pollution must be prioritized to receive direct investments to develop and implement their own community-led clean energy solutions, solutions that are by the community and for the community. The state's climate plan must not include false solutions. No cap and trade, no hydrogen blending or combustion, no carbon capture and sequestration, and no more gas. These are all corporate and fossil fuel industry efforts to perpetuate harm in frontline communities and exacerbate climate impacts with no effort to address generations of chronic health disparities from this pollution. Multiple expert reports have proven that investing in clean energy and emission reductions will create thousands more jobs than the fossil fuel industry. Green jobs are union jobs. Green jobs are local jobs. Green jobs are accessible jobs. And green jobs are well-paying, family-sustaining jobs. We do not have to choose between our lives or our livelihoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph?
Lauren Schwartz, Sierra Club.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me with the mask or should I remove it? Sorry, a lot of people have talked about the need to ramp up the popularity, affordability, and availability of electric vehicles. And I just want to talk about why we don't see more of them on the road. What many in New York don't realize is that you cannot just go to your local dealership and test drive an electric car before buying it. Ironically, from 2019 to 2020, New Yorkers had bought only 35,000 EVs compared to Florida, where despite their more conservative government, Floridians bought 59,000. Why? Because in Florida, a person in the market for a new car can go to a dealership and test drive one. In addition to the lack of display models and test drive opportunities, a recent Sierra Club blind shopper study found also that there are not even salespeople trained about electric vehicles at most car dealerships. And one volunteer shopper reported that they were actually urged by the salesman to change their mind and just buy a gas-powered vehicle instead because he couldn't answer their questions about electric. If you want to see a more rapid market growth of EVs, then the prohibitions on direct sales and test drives at local car dealerships must change. They are a major barrier. Tesla is the only electric vehicle company even allowed to have stores in New York, and they are legally limited to only 5 stores. In Florida, they have 17. The continued dealer protection laws are obsolete and must change. Soon, Ford, Chrysler, Volkswagen, etc. will be introducing new electric vehicles. They need to be made available for car dealerships everywhere to display and provide test drive opportunities, as well as retraining the sales force to know what is available and to be able to answer customer questions like an expert, and to have the answers ready at their fingertips if they don't know the answer on the spot. And most of that information I just want to mention. Is my time up?
Thank you
Okay,
very
that's
much.
fine. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Could we get group 10, please, to, I'm sorry, 9? I missed one, sorry. Could we get group 9, please, to line up behind Vince? Thank you. Thanks for correcting me.
James Sharon Jr., President, Enterprise Association of Steam Fitters, LU 638.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity for addressing the council tonight. I am the president of the Steam Fitters Local 638 of New York City and Long Island. I represent 9,300 members, with 5,000 of them who live and work in New York City and the 5 boroughs alone. We represent a highly skilled and trained workforce that has been involved in the power piping industry for over 140 years. Our apprenticeship program, I believe, is second to none in the state. We have trained our workers to be in this power piping, where we have educated them to become highly adapted to the new technologies in power piping and the energy sectors, and we still want to be part of that coming up. This transition needs to be an educated transition. We understand, like many in this room, our members have kids and grandkids that they're concerned with the climate as well. We all have the same concerns in this room. We just don't concern ourselves with, oh, we just want a job. Our members care about their kids' future. We care about our grandkids' future. So we want this education of the transition, and we want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Our members are going to be educated in any transition that we do. We believe in the biofuels, that we can get there. We know we just can't ban the gas and turn it off today. Our grid will not suffice it. We cannot outsource our work anymore. Our New Yorkers need to be upfront and part of this solution. We can't just outsource it to other states and outsource it to the other part of the state. We need to address it here in New York City.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Joseph?
Sal Lopizzo of the Sierra Club.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. I'm a member of Sierra. I'd just like to say this, gentlemen, we're all behind you. We want to change the way people are learning. We have new technology. We are smart people. We can change. We can get rid of the horseshoe. We did it with a lot of other ways. Here's my deal. My deal is I believe in renewable energy. I was part of Hurricane Sandy, the relief effort that happened there. We were devastated. There was no utilities there. It was only the people of New York City that showed up. That's what changed my life. I believe in passive buildings. We need passive buildings. New York is not as progressive as we say we are. We could do retrofit, but we're not building any passive buildings. The combustion engine is obsolete. So are these giant windmills that they want to put out in the ocean. They're already obsolete, but the utility companies are trying to sell them to us as clean. They're going to be miles out there. Who the hell is going to maintain them? And then who's going to pay for this, for the maintenance? We are. Every building should be off the grid. There's no reason why we can't have solar and wind energy on our buildings, off the grid. Why won't they let us do it? And we're only one president away from that, all the work that we've been doing for all these years, since the 60s and 70s, to be thrown in the garbage by one president. And we almost came very close. I don't want to put fear into it, but that's a reality we have to deal with. We're at war. Everybody here is on the same page. We need to speak up. We need to fight. We can't just go on Facebook and click I like. We have to really start doing this. I love this country. I love this planet. The people in these other countries, third world countries, you could go there and put up solar panels in a heartbeat. Can you do it here in New York? No. You can go into Africa and drill a well. Can you do that here? No. What is the problem with us? The problem is wealth creates greed. That's the problem. Thank you. I love you.
Thank you for your comment. Vince?
Michael Coble, business agent, local 638 Steam Fitters.
Good evening. We live here, we work here, we are raising our families here. We care about climate issues. We all suffer from the same blackouts and the flooding of Hurricanes Sandy and Ida. We went to work and fixed what was broken. We need to focus on policies that achieve a smooth transition to renewable system. We need to maintain reliability while being much more aggressive in pursuing non-carbon technologies like nuclear, wind, solar, battery storage, hydrogen, and geothermal heating. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph?
Devin Inez Fusaro of Brooklyn, New York.
Hello, my name is Devin Inez Fusaro. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I've lived in New York City for 11 years, and I hope to live here for many more. I hope to share this home with the next generation, but first we have to make it habitable, sustainable, equitable, and we have to do so justly. So I want to emphasize that the implementation of the CLCPA must follow the principles of a just transition as we create a regenerative economy with a collaborative, community-centered approach that seeks to uplift equity and create high-quality, family-sustaining jobs across sectors. The Climate Action Council must establish a worker and community assurance fund and identify a mechanism to provide adequate financial support to displaced workers in fossil fuel-dependent industries and to communities who rely on such industries. The Climate Action Council must come down in strong support of labor standards and policies that require prevailing wage and benefits, local hire, and community benefits agreements. The Climate Action Council must ensure that the state fund training and workforce development programs to provide a pathway for members of our disadvantaged communities and traditionally excluded workers to join the green workforce. These concepts, among myriad others, and the support needed to share them with you today are made possible by the organizing of engaged communities, particularly those on the front lines of the climate crisis and thus the front lines of the solutions. My deepest gratitude to them. I want to leave you with the words of visionary fiction author Octavia Butler. In Butler's Dawn, the protagonist Lilith awakens after a human-induced apocalypse on Earth among a highly intelligent alien species on their home, which she is taught to call the ship. Here is how her alien guide describes the relationship between them and their home. There is an affinity, but it's biological, a strong symbiotic relationship. We serve the ship's needs and it serves ours. It would die without us and we would be planet-bound without it. For us, that would eventually mean death. Where did you get it? Lilith asks. We grew it, the guide responds. Together, let's grow a climate-stable home. We don't have time to wait. Thank you.
Thank you. Vince?
Gupta, Valhalla, New York.
Good afternoon. I asked the Council to urgently launch a sustained statewide public information campaign to counter the relentless disinformation crusades by the same old nefarious actors who have spent decades perfecting their chicanery, first to deny climate science and now to cast doubt on real solutions. Just like the tobacco industry, they knew forever that their product causes mortal harm, yet they promoted it while hiding its dangers, gaining footholds into millions of kitchens in New York and from there into the basements. And now, they have their knees on our necks and we can't breathe. We can't breathe for our lungs are not made for the toxic slew of byproducts of burning their fossil gas. This violence of fossil fuels in our homes, on our bodies, and on our children must end. The violence from the piped poison into our buildings claims the lives of 2,000 New Yorkers each year, with countless illnesses and disabilities, and over $22 billion in healthcare costs. And the monopolistic monster of fracked gas has millions of its filthy tentacles reaching into each of our homes, pumping in poison and sucking away our health and our earnings, only to bamboozle us into using our own money to keep feeding the parasitic monster. This parasitic monster of greed, a national disgrace, must be tamed before it devours us all. Make no mistakes, the fossil fuels are going down. The best of climate science tells us that the difference between fossil fuels going down without us or them going down, taking the rest of humanity with them, could be a mere decade. So, respected council members and fellow citizens in this room, this is a fight for our lives and we must win. We have no choice. We must fight like we are fighting to stop a nuclear war. The stakes are almost the same. Locally, right here, we must overcome the disgraceful monster of greed. Greed that masquerades as national, but in reality is a corrupt transoceanic implant. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph, hang on for a second. Could we get group 10, please, to line up behind Joseph? And Moses, could you come down and relieve Joseph? Thank you. Joseph, who's next?
Senior Director, Northeast Region, CalSTART.
Good evening. Thank you to the Climate Action Council. My name is Ben Mandel. I'm Senior Director for the Northeast Region at CalSTART, a leading national clean transportation nonprofit with our Northeast Regional office located here in Brooklyn. CalSTART has As we shift focus toward the strategies to realize the CLCPA's ambitious targets, it's critical that we take bold actions to dramatically decarbonize our transportation system without sacrificing economic prosperity. Transportation emissions account for 28% of New York State greenhouse gas emissions and have proven difficult to abate, with sector emissions now 16% higher than 1990 levels. To accelerate the reversal of transportation sector emissions, we must activate a wholesale transition of on-road vehicles and off-road equipment to zero-emission systems. We also remain overly reliant on personal vehicles for passenger movement when transit and supportive micromobility would be a vastly more efficient and healthier alternative. And likewise, we must unlock a transition in last-mile goods movement to drastically reduce the share of deliveries done by trucks in our cities in favor of non-vehicular technologies. New York's recent adoption of the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation sent a powerful message that one of the nation's largest truck markets will be fully electrified by 2045. Looking ahead, New York must remain actively engaged in the process to adopt Advanced Clean Cars 2. We support this recommendation as the regulatory means to achieve the governor's commitment to 100% zero-emission sales of light-duty vehicles by 2035. Sustained incentives will be critical to ensuring that regulatory targets for ZEV sales are attainable. These programs will need much greater funding levels to support the desired levels of uptake and must also be refined to include secondary market purchases so that used electric cars and trucks can better compete with petroleum-burning vehicles. We also support the inclusion of mode shift to transit and other low-carbon mobility alternatives in addition to the pursuit of these ZEV targets, as well as the adoption of a clean fuel standard as a critical and direct means to effectuate the desired emissions reductions from the transportation sector in the near term.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick.
Abigail Stiles, NYPIRG.
My name is Abigail, and I'm a student studying criminal justice at BMCC. Students will have to face a future of climate chaos if we do not adequately enforce the CLCPA and hold polluters accountable when the law is broken. It is clear that we need to get off fossil fuels immediately. The law should stop the creation of all new fossil fuel infrastructure and establish clear emissions reduction timetables for existing facilities in order to meet its 2030 and 2050 goals. Alongside halting all new fossil fuel construction, the CLCPA needs to match New York City's Electric Buildings Act law, replacing heating systems with electric heat pumps in at least 2 million homes by 2030. In addition, I want no part in funding me and my own community's destruction. The scoping plan should end the practice of giving taxpayer subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. Public money should not be going to industries that are primarily responsible for the climate crisis. Environmental justice communities like my neighborhood of South Jamaica, Queens, need to be prioritized when implementing the law. I have seen the devastation of climate change firsthand when the basement of my building flooded and my church damaged by Hurricane Ida. I had to relocate like so many of my neighbors due to the damages, and we are still recovering from it to this day. The CLCPA is the most important tool we have at our disposal to make sure we have a just transition and a future for students like me. There has never been a more urgent time to enforce New York's leading climate law. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses.
Anthony Ng, Queens Climate Project.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Ng. I'm a steering committee member of the Queens Climate Project. We are a group of Queens neighbors and residents working towards a healthier and carbon-free future for Queens and New York City. 8 months ago, the remnants of Hurricane Ida caused severe flooding in Queens. There was waist-deep water at Queens Boulevard and Broadway, a 15-minute walk from my home in Jackson Heights. My building experienced a mild flooding, and unfortunately, 11 Queens residents, mostly low-income Asian immigrants, died because their basement apartments flooded. The flooding caused by Ida was another sad reminder of the disproportionate impact that frontline communities of color face when extreme weather brought on by climate change. This year, we must accelerate and scale up the climate solutions that can achieve the CLCPA's landmark greenhouse gas emission reductions and renewable energy targets. Profits over people cannot win this time. We urge the Climate Action Council to stand strong in the face of fossil fuel interests whose proposals for and concerns on the Climate Act don't reflect the courage and urgency we need to address the climate crisis. The scoping plan must be bold, imaginative, and prioritize environmental justice, public health, and a just transition as follows. 48% of New York's households are low to moderate income. With investments in green building upgrades, we can take a fairer approach to making these buildings safer and move off of fossil fuels. To reach the goal of 70% renewable energy by 2030, we need more renewable energy, and we need a ban on repowering gas plants. Thank you to the governor and to Commissioner Sagos for denying the energy permits. We hope you uphold that moving forward. And as some of my other speakers have said today, we need to support workers. We need to ensure labor standards. We need the Worker Assurance Fund. We need investments in workforce development to create green jobs and to bring forth the climate jobs and justice we need. We're counting on you, Climate Action Council, to approve a scoping plan that boldly supports climate solution, jobs, and justice. Please don't let us down.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Patrick.
Catherine Skopik, Sierra Club.
Greetings. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our concerns regarding this life-supporting issue. My name is Catherine Skopik. Among other things, I'm chair of the Sierra Club, New York City group. Thank you. We live downtown in Tribeca, southwest Manhattan, south of Canal Street, in flood zone B, right on the border of flood zone A. I'm here testifying today for renewable energy and to stop fossil fuels as yet another installment in this insurance policy I have for my daughter. I've been caring for her since she weighed 5 pounds 7 ounces. I'm in my third act and will not be here when the 10-foot sea level rise reaches us here in New York City. But she probably will be. What will become of her? Will she become a climate refugee, as have so many people around the world fleeing from heat, drought, and flood? We've talked about future climate possibilities. Scientists telling us are coming. It frightens her, so we can't talk about it often. But we can prevent the worst of the dangerous climate impacts by stopping the drilling, mining, and burning of fossil fuels and methane. We know this truth. We have the technology to provide the renewable energy we need. I know a fossil fuel worker in Pennsylvania, actually, who saw that what he was doing by working in the fracking industry was wrong. It was destroying people's health, poisoning their water, and killing their livestock. He quit and sought a safer job for himself, others, and the planet. Would that all such workers would do the same? Would that they would not have to?
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Would
Moses.
that they would not
Isabella Connolly, Tree Age.
Hi, my name is Isabel Connolly, and I'm a part of Triage. I have lived in Brooklyn for my entire life, and I'm currently a junior at Beacon High School. I have lived in Gowanus, Brooklyn, for my entire life, and I'm very close to the extremely toxic and polluted Gowanus Canal. There have been many promises of when this polluted body of water would be cleaned, and it seems to constantly get worse. There needs to be plans in place to keep the city on track to clean up and make sure that this body of water doesn't get further polluted. The scoping plan must ensure that the mandates put forth by the Climate Action Council are legally enforceable. We need goals that are met and projects that don't get forgotten about because there are humans living in these unsafe environments. Provisions for environmental justice and emission reduction means nothing if they cannot be enforced. We should not be living so close to these toxic bodies of water. It is dangerous and greatly affects the natural life around the area. Things need to change so that there can be accomplishments and environmental advances in these areas that needs to be fixed and in places that are so heavily populated. Many public housing projects have been near the Gowanus Canal for years, and the CIC does not adequately advocate for increased public investment in land access and resources for underserved communities. Only because of the increase in wealthy families moving to the area has the Gowanus cleanup really begun. New York should focus on enforcing an equitable economy-wide pollution fee to generate funds that will be dedicated to reduce co-pollutant emissions along with greenhouse gases. Funds would go towards reducing our city and state's pollutant rates and would help make communities better for the environment. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Have a great day.
Thank you. Patrick?
Lee Zishi, Deputy Director, Media and Communications, Sane Energy Project.
Sorry. Okay. 33 years ago today, I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So thanks for all showing up for my birthday. For 9 of those 33 years, most of my adult life, I have worked with dozens of communities across New York and Pennsylvania as a documentary filmmaker and organizer to tell the stories of people being harmed by fracking and frack gas infrastructure and to stop projects like National Grid's North Brooklyn Pipeline and frack gas vaporizers. I'm here today to ask the Climate Action Council to support Scenario 3, the only plan that follows climate science and the hard-fought-for provisions of the CLCPA. Governor Cuomo might have put the word leadership in the name of the law, but we know it's frontline leaders, Black and brown Indigenous people of color, who made the CLCPA groundbreaking by including protections for environmental justice communities and recognizing the very potent greenhouse gas methane is. We need those provisions to protect communities like Cooper Park houses, over 700 predominantly Black and brown families living next to National Grid's aging and dangerous LNG storage facility where many people have health issues. These communities have been failed to be protected by the Public Service Commission, who continue to approve the build-out of dangerous frack gas, all on our dime. My great-grandpa worked in a steel mill in Pittsburgh, and his daughter, my grandma, and I don't agree on everything, but we are united in our strong support of workers and union labor. So to the union brothers and sisters in this room today asking for a delay, please know that the rich people who run corporations like National Grid have been delaying to get off fossil fuels my entire life, and that people living next to frack gas power plants and pipelines don't have a choice, and neither do consumers who actually don't know how bad gas is. So we are with you, we stand with you, we will be with you in this transition for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moses?
Carlo Casa, Director of Policy and Research, New York Building Congress.
Good morning, President Harris, Commissioner Sagos, and members of the Climate Action Committee. I want to thank you today for your work on this important issue and for providing us with the opportunity to testify today. My name is Carlo Casa. I'm the Director of Research and Policy at the New York Building Congress. I'm speaking on behalf of Carlos Shasura, President and CEO of the New York Building Congress. The Building Congress represents over 550 organizations made up of over 250,000 skilled tradespeople and professionals. We commend our partners in state government for enacting the CLCPA and their work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase renewable energy usage. Climate change is one of the biggest threats we face today. However, we want to ensure that when achieving these goals, the CAC has considered all energy options and implements an economically sound energy transition. The current draft scoping plan includes bans on new gas service. By focusing on electrification alone instead of lower cost and similarly carbon neutral energy sources, we may significantly increase the cost of constructing buildings. This makes it difficult for our members to work on important public projects, namely affordable housing, of which the city is in desperate need. When implementing this transition, we insist that the CAC ensures building costs remain affordable and that low-income households are not disproportionately affected by an exacerbated housing shortage. Today, we simply cannot meet New York's projected energy needs with just renewable energy. We commend the governor and the state legislature for including funding in the state budget to reach the goals outlined in the CLCPA. But we urge the CAC to also work with the federal government to utilize infrastructure funding for the development of clean energy infrastructure. Additionally, we urge the committee to investigate a hybrid approach that uses all clean technologies available to us. The Building Congress and its members are committed to policies that aggressively combat climate change. We appreciate the complexity of overhauling New York's energy system, but in doing so, we must first ensure an adequate energy supply, promote economic development, and protect disadvantaged communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would Group 11 please make their way down behind Patrick? Thank you, Patrick. Patrick?
Paul Gallay, Director, Resilient Coastal Communities Project, Columbia Climate School.
Thank you all, and thank you to my Resilient Coastal Communities project partners at Columbia Climate School and the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. First, on mitigation, the Climate Action Council put forth 3 scenarios, and the right one is number 3. Low to no bioenergy and hydrogen combustion, and the simultaneous acceleration of electrification of both buildings and transportation. Second, unless justice and equity are central components of our climate agenda, the inequality of the carbon-based economy will be replicated in the new economy. To effectively address climate change, the state's climate policy agenda must drive actions that result in real benefits at the local and community level, including pollution reduction, affordable and quality housing, good jobs, sustainable livelihoods, and community infrastructure. On adaptation, first, to quote the Army Corps, the best solutions to our resilience challenges involve multiple layered features. There is no magic wall you can build to protect from storm surge, sea level rise, and stationary storm systems. Instead, we must max out on approaches like green infrastructure, wetlands restoration. We must prevent development in sensitive areas, improve voluntary home buyout programs as a last resort, and you've got to benchmark what the meaningful level of achievement is for each of these, invest enough to meet those benchmarks, and be honest about whether you're actually getting the job done. Finally, only through a fundamental systemic change in the process by which coastal resilience planning is done and the role locally based organizations play in those processes can communities, governments, and academics working in true partnership foster just and restorative resilience projects that keep our communities safe and make them more vibrant while providing for healthier, more biodiverse ecosystems. Government must share leadership on project design and implementation with those communities that are on the front lines of climate risk and injustice, and my colleagues and I look forward to working with the state to help make that happen.
Thank you. Would Group 12 please go down behind Patrick? Patrick, could you just raise your hand for Group 12? There is no one from Group 12, and Group 13. Let's take Group 12 and 13 at the same time. Moses.
Paul Rosenberg, Senior Manager, Government Affairs and Corporate Cooperations for Suburban Propane.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Paul Rosenberg. I am the Senior Manager for Government Affairs and Corporate Communications for Suburban Propane. Suburban supports the decarbonization of all sectors of the economy, and we urge the adoption of a scoping plan that utilizes a technology-neutral approach. By using data and carbon intensity scores as benchmarks, we can use a wide range of low carbon, carbon neutral, and even carbon negative fuels to reduce emissions. Just by way of example, for the transportation sector is the Clean Fuel Standard, which has been adopted in California, Oregon, and Washington already. This type of all-in approach has the benefit of being able to reduce emissions today not years from now when the technology is more advanced. And in addition, a tech-neutral strategy can act as an economic generator for the state by incentivizing innovation and investments in producing lower and lower carbon fuels. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Bella Elzinga, Uprose.
Hi, my name is Becca Elzinga, and I'm a resident of Sunset Park, Brooklyn. I never thought that at 27 years old, I would be grappling with an existential threat like climate change on a daily basis, but here we are. To be honest, it was very intimidating and disheartening to arrive here and see two competing rallies taking place. The people on each side have valid fears and legitimate concerns, and it's awful to see New Yorkers who want the best for our city and state falsely pitted against each other. It's imperative that we find a just path forward and recognize that we won't get there without buy-in from labor. The key here, though, is that it is, in fact, a path forward. As such, I'd like to call on the Climate Action Council to act aggressively on decarbonizing our city and state and fully funding and implementing the CLCPA as law. As a resident of an environmental justice community, I believe strongly that the needs of low-income communities of color must come first. Communities on the front lines of climate change deserve protection and support for the unjust environmental burdens they bear. The CLCPA must champion public health guidelines, strong labor standards, workforce development, and community power and participation in all decision-making. Since I was 10 years old, first learning about climate change, it has shocked me how people in power have squandered their responsibility to protect our planet and our communities. At this crucial moment for our climate, with a law perfectly poised to transform our state for the better, I'm asking that this opportunity not be wasted and not be weakened. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses?
Kim A. Frakes, Director of Sane Energy Project.
Thanks. It's Fratchek. I'm the Director of Sane Energy Project and a resident of Brooklyn, Bushwick, Brooklyn. Thank you to the Climate Action Council for hearing our input on the draft scoping plan, and a hearty thank you to the activists in this room and outside this room, the masses of New York residents who were unable to attend a daytime hearing during a work week, yet worked tirelessly for years to draft and pass the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that will uplift the people who make up our great communities and labor force for an equitable and just path that would address the climate crisis impacting our world. My organization, along with tens of thousands of frontline residents fighting the massive, expensive, dangerous, racist, and unnecessary North Brooklyn fracked gas pipeline and LNG expansion that takes our future in the wrong direction, is one of the many examples why we need to fund the CLCPA with everything we have, to ensure large corporations like the utilities cannot choose poison and worker abuse in our communities while seeing record profits during the pandemic. We need our labor force working to install community geothermal energy efficiency upgrades and renewable energy that is actually renewable, not the false solutions like so-called green hydrogen and so-called renewable natural gas that National Grid proposes to keep their CEO, John Pettigrew, making $4,300 per hour, building the paradigm that our workers must keep building fossil fuel infrastructure that poisons our families and neighbors. This is why National Grid is working hard right now to buy the media and hold one-sided energy conferences that hold labor hostage, spread inaccuracies to our elected officials and community newspapers to keep the system of abuse in place. The CLCPA is actually our law. We've taken enough kicking the can down the road to protect our climate and communities, and I'll be submitting a written statement. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. Patrick?
Umet Meru, the Veggie Nuggets.
Hello. Hello, my name. Oh, thank you. It's okay. I'll just hold it. Hello, my name is Umid Maru. I'm in the 8th grade. I'm not an expert. I'm just a citizen who has done my research. And I'm part of the Veggie Nuggets, which is a youth climate justice group in Queens, where I live. Why am I here? I'm here because of the lack of green infrastructure and because climate change is my future. I go to school on public transit, and the lack is showing. I can take a bus, but buses are always packed. Once 4 full buses pass by without one stopping. The 7 train is packed to the point where I have to shove to get in, inbound at 7 a.m. as it is in my neighborhood. Most days I resort to running the whole way with a backpack on to catch the MR train, which then takes me to school. I know a friend who waits up to an hour between buses just to get to school. The draft scoping plan does not adequately address the need to expand on green transportation infrastructure. Many communities are hit harder by the lack of infrastructure in the climate crisis. I know that people have had to move because their apartments were destroyed during Hurricane Sandy. In Asthma Alley, that includes parts of Queens and the Bronx, respiratory conditions are much more common there because of the power plants built along the river. The draft scoping plan needs to be advantageous to all, meaning that it will need to take into account historic issues with previously disadvantaged communities. This includes consent from minority communities before building any new fossil fuel projects such as pipelines or power plants, investing in groups that give to the community through renewable energy and other forms of outreach, and pensions for all workers affected who could lose their jobs, paid for by the employers of these workers in part. This includes transportation workers, it includes miners, and it includes people who work at power plants. Without careful consideration of communities most harmed by climate change, the scoping plan will never be truly environmentally just. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses. Patrick, why don't you hold that? Why don't you hold that? Moses?
Queens Climate Project.
Hi, my name is Victoria Adler. I'm a member of the Queens Climate Project Steering Committee. I'm a public school speech provider and union member, and a mother of 2. I know that testimonies often, they tell you to start with a personal story, but to me this issue is different than other issues because it is not personal. When I think of everything I love, nature, seasons, coffee, clean air, snow, tap water, biodiversity, my wonderful children, my city, my safety and health, every place and person I love, every activity I do has been and will be impacted by the dangerous warming of the planet. And this is true for every person in this room and every person in the world. So it is not a personal issue, but a moral issue. We need to see beyond the sphere of our own concerns and act aggressively with the future in mind. Diluting climate laws, short-sighted pandering to fossil fuel industries will be suicide for us. For this reason, the CLCPA must be executed as written, no compromises. We need a full transition to a clean energy economy by 2050, zero-emission electrical grid, and a detailed roadmap of how to fully achieve electrified transportation. We must do this, no delay. We must need to be strong on gas, which means stop building fossil fuel plants, making sure new buildings are electric, and helping all housing, small to large, get off fossil fuel. And we need massive amounts of money in every sector to help with this transition. I despair if our wonderful state will allow our law to be watered down by special interests and cowardice.
Thank you. Could we get group 14, please, to make their way down behind Moses? Patrick?
Anand Maru, the Veggie Nuggets.
Hello, my name is Anand Maru, an 8th grader, and I live and go to school in Queens. I'm part of the Veggie Nuggets, a youth climate organization that is based in Queens, and part of the NY Renews Coalition. I support Scenario 3 of the draft scoping plan. As a person with much of my life ahead of me, the climate crisis will likely define my future unless New York and the world act quickly and decisively. I believe we need to invest more in renewables and deliver on the promises made in the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, and make New York a national precedent for effective climate action in the future. New York is a city greatly affected by climate change, and we all know that. And I want to be able to live a full life without flooding, pollutants, increasing heat, or hurricanes like Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Ida. There's a reason that the term that people use often is environmental justice rather than merely fighting climate change, because we need true justice for our communities. The transition to renewables must not neglect minority communities, and should be just and create good, well-paid green jobs for those impacted the most by climate change. Our communities must not be forgotten, and the fight against climate change is also the fight against racism and discrimination. This draft scoping plan must prioritize just and fair action that benefits those most impacted by climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses.
Rebecca Salaton, Indivisible Harlem, Invest in Our New York Coalition.
Hi, I'm Becky Salatan. I'm a founding member of the grassroots group Indivisible Harlem and of the Invest in Our New York Coalition of more than 200 groups who work for greater equity across the state, including trying to get the CLCPA equitably funded. By profession, I'm a book editor. I know that words matter, but only when they translate into action. My husband has lifelong asthma. Thanks to private health care and the breezes that blow off the Hudson through Morningside Heights where we live, he manages it okay. Only a few miles from us, North Harlem and the Bronx have some of the worst air quality in the state and some of the highest rates of asthma and asthma deaths. We are a tale of two New Yorks. Before the pandemic, our neighbors banded together to get curbside compost pickup. Despite our many calls and emails, it has not been restored. Rats have emerged as a local public health issue. One of our daughters works for a fabric recycling nonprofit. It's a model of exactly what we're talking about, waste reduction and green jobs. If the state mandated such approaches, the impact on both would be massive. Our other daughter, too, chose her work based on the issues she cares most about, housing and the environment. All around me, I see New Yorkers trying to do our part, but we can't do it on our own. From my activism, I know not only what investment costs, but the far greater costs of inaction, false solutions, and halfway measures. The CLCPA was landmark legislation of which every New Yorker had reason to be proud. But until it is implemented, strongly and equitably implemented, it is just words. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick.
Santayehu Subert, the Veggie Nuggets.
Hi, my name is Santayehu Subert, and I'm a resident of Queens and a member of the Veggie Nuggets, a youth climate group in Queens, also part of the NY Renews. The MTA bus I need to get to and from school is across a highway, making it a dangerous route for me and my 8-year-old sister to go to. We have to wait over 15 minutes for the bus to arrive and watch 2 full buses pass by my stop. This has caused me to have to wake up earlier and even be late for school. Though New York City has invented the clean diesel buses, electric buses, and compressed natural gas buses, it hasn't fixed the problem, but it's a start. By expanding the amount of electrified buses, especially in low-income neighborhoods, we can help New Yorkers everywhere. Innocent New Yorkers are paying the price by being exposed to toxic emissions and greenhouse gases while simply walking to work or school. I've seen this firsthand by watching my sister, who has asthma, struggle to breathe from fumes due to a nearby car. If we want to reach zero emissions, we need to work as a community, and we can do this in so many ways, including shutting down power plants, using wind and solar energy, and using electric cars, all included in this scenario 3. Without funding the CLCPA, none of these things will happen, and innocent New Yorkers will continue to suffer and die due to climate change. The CLCPA can help thousands of New York City kids get to school safely and make sure public transportation is accessible to all. Not only my future is on the line, but my sister's, and it's in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses.
Cindy Boubet, Sierra Club.
Hi, this is all new to me. God bless you all. My name is Cindy Bobe. I'm here with the Sierra Club. I'm Boricua, and I live in Brooklyn. I'm a mom of 2 children, one of them being special needs. I don't know much, as I'm just learning about the climate change, but I do know love deeply, and I love my children, and I love the world with a passion. I started living better to save the world. I'm trying my best and doing my part to make a difference, not only for the future of my children, but for the future of the children in the world. I'm asking that you please do the right thing and save our planet. You can make a difference. I have faith in you. Be the change. It starts with you. I thank you in advance for saving the world. I love you. Fight for our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Emily Fisher, Haptic Lab, Inc.
Hi, my name's Emily. I'm an entrepreneur and a business owner who runs a small design company called Haptic Lab. 10 years ago, Hurricane Sandy completely trashed my waterfront studio in Dumbo, located just a few blocks away from where we are today. During that time, my employees noticed a weird glow in the neighborhood. It was the only light probably for a mile or more, and it turned out to be some solar-powered streetlights in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. At first, I thought, wow, cool. But my second thought was, how insulting. Because those fancy streetlights were shining on an empty parking lot while 100 yards away, the people in Farragut, NYCHA housing were in the dark. The climate crisis has created these walled gardens, condos and offices, and even parking spaces where resources are kept and hoarded from others. My company and I strongly support the creation of a new retrofit and electrification readiness fund. This fund should be created as soon as possible and capitalized at a minimum of $1 billion per year following the recommendations of the Energy Efficiency and Housing Advisory Panel. The fund should provide targeted investments to the affordable housing sector. My company is now a tenant of the Brooklyn-owned Navy Yard, and I literally look at the Farragut housing every day from my studio. And next to nothing has happened in the 10 years since Sandy. But I think this law is an incredible chance for us to set things right and to break down the walled gardens and center disadvantaged communities in a just transition from fossil fuels. People before empty parking lots. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses?
Allison Considine, Campaign Representative, Sierra Club.
Good evening and thank you. My name is Allison Considine and I'm the Senior Campaign Representative for the Sierra Club in New York. We have 50,000 members and supporters across the state, many of whom have spoken movingly tonight about their commitment to their communities, their children, and our future. We're in a challenging moment. Dozens more activists are not here tonight because they are marching for abortion rights. Investor-owned utilities like National Grid and companies with seats on the CAC, like National Fuel Gas, are spreading fear and claiming that we are turning too quickly away from methane gas, even as families still grieve the deaths of the 13 people who died from Hurricane Ida in New York City. We will continue to see storms like Ida as warmer temperatures from burning fossil fuels drives more extreme weather. When we consider the lives lost to decades of air pollution, the cost of continuing on our current path become truly staggering, and the callousness of the industry in seeking to slow this plan becomes more disturbing. Methane is 86 times more potent than CO2 at driving warming. Continuing to invest in infrastructure to transport it and burn it would be disastrous. The governor and the CAC have an obligation to New Yorkers to advance a scoping plan that responds to the intensity of these disasters by addressing the root causes: fossil fuel combustion, environmental racism, and corporate capture of our energy systems and democratic processes by the fossil fuel industry. We urge you to embrace what we know works and stick to the strong commitments in the draft plan. We can build renewable energy, transmission, storage, and implement efficiency to meet our mandates, but we need year-by-year targets in the plan to make sure that we stay on track. We've long since surpassed the need for new gas-fired power plants, and the plan should affirm that and turn to the work of retiring existing plants, coupled with investments to help workers and communities transition. For the gas system transition, it must be organized around achieving our climate commitments, not pursuing the course that is most profitable to gas distribution companies. We need all-electric new buildings by 2024, we need to end gas utility subsidies, and we need real funding and support to phase out gas appliances and heating, starting with low and moderate income customers first. Compared to the false promise of RNG and hydrogen, renewables and electrification are cheaper, readily available, and emissions-free. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Chief Executive Officer, the New York State Energy Coalition.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity today. My name is Rocco Lastratosa. I'm the CEO of the New York State Energy Coalition. NYSEC is a trade association of retail and wholesale heating, fuels, and energy marketers in the 5 boroughs, Nassau and Suffolk counties, representing over 70% of the state home heating oil market. My members are mostly family-owned and operated businesses of multiple generations, and we provide good Teamster jobs. NYSEC has embraced the tenets of climate change and is actively working to replace petroleum diesel used in space heating with clean-burning liquid renewable biofuels, specifically biodiesel and renewable diesel. These fuels reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% and reduce particulate matter by 86%. Biodiesel is a drop-in replacement for petroleum diesel, meaning that home heating oil customers can simply switch to these clean-burning fuels without changing their current heating systems. In addition, NYSERDA's own pricing data shows that biodiesel generally tracks or is below the price of petroleum diesel, so that there's no increased cost to consumers. Moreover, the two largest home heating appliance manufacturers, Beckett Corporation and Carlin Corporation, are working with Underwriters Laboratories on appliance components that will be rated and warranted for 100% biofuels. Manufacturing is expected to begin in 2023. The major focus of the climate change initiative is health and air quality related. Biodiesel and renewable diesel burn 80% cleaner than the fuel they would replace, and given the pollutants they will reduce the risk of cancer by 85%, reduce instances of asthma, and will, as well as premature deaths, lost work days, and lost activity days. The health care avoidance of using biofuels is evident and should be welcomed by the EJ communities and the disadvantaged communities in New York City.
Thank you for your comments. Could Group 16 make their way down behind Patrick, please? Group 16. Moses.
Michael Combs, organizer for Plumbers Local 1.
Hi, I'm Michael Combs. I live in Brooklyn, and I'm blessed to be a skilled blue-collar worker with Local 1 Plumbers. I have 2 young children and have dreams of a bright future for them. Part of that future is me continuing to have my job and making a living wage. Yes, climate action is vital for the planet and needs to happen, but there has to be a better plan than taking national gas jobs away from the struggling middle class of this city. Passing reactive policies without being fully transparent is detrimental to our well-being. The electric grid is not ready for all the electric heating. Other warmer states have had huge power outages. What happens when a brutal northeast winter comes and I don't have heat and my family is freezing? I hear this ban will create jobs. Will there be jobs that can support the cost of living here in New York City? Will they compare to the prevailing wage offered by the union? And what about all the jobs that will be lost and the tables without food? I know it's not a black and white situation and there's no easy answers, but make a plan that protects the environment and protects jobs realistically.
Thank you. Patrick?
George Malandrakis, business agent, Plumbers, Local 1.
Good afternoon. My name is George Malandrakis, business agent in the great borough of Brooklyn. I'm a 38-year member of Local 1 Plumbers and gas fitters. So I really haven't heard anybody talk about the cost of the consumer when it comes to transitioning. So, you know, there are studies that have shown in order to transition from gas to all electric in a private home, you're looking at a cost of upwards of $50,000. You're looking at a new panel, new wiring, more power, new boiler, hot water, appliances. I'm looking to pay off my mortgage and retire one day. And as a retiree on a fixed income, how do I afford a bill like $50,000? Maybe we should let the consumer have a choice to decide whether, you know, do I want to go electric or do I want to use gas? It should be a choice left up to the consumer. Lastly, I'd like to finish. You know, there's been a lot of sympathetic words that have been spoken here today about the labor movement. But when 20 to 25% of my work, 6,200 members in my local, trained, skilled craftsmen and women, when we depend on 25% of that work for our gas, sympathetic words advocating for the loss of 1,500 jobs, it doesn't sound very sympathetic to me. So I think, you know, maybe we take a little step back, reassess this and take our time and make a decision that makes sense, maybe a feasibility study. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Moses.
Carl Gambino, Plumbers Local 1.
Good afternoon. My name is Carl Gambino, and I'm a proud Brooklynite, born and raised in Marine Park. I'm also a proud member of Plumbers Local 1. I'm a firm believer of climate change and of renewable energy resources, but I'm 100% against the CAC's draft to ban natural gas by 2030. By eliminating natural gas, we're basically relying on the infrastructure of electricity. Today alone, right now, there are 23 power outages in New York City. Throughout the day, and that's just today, there were at least 218 New Yorkers without power. How can we depend basically on one energy source? When Sandy hit my Marine Park community, we were very fortunate that we didn't have severe flooding, but we did have no electric. And we did have natural gas. So the CAC draft to ban the draft to ban natural gas is on a very aggressive timeline. The time is now for the CAC to come up with a common sense plan with the union trades to reduce natural gas and not to ban it. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Carl Johnson, business agent, Plumbers Local 1.
Good evening. My name is Carl Johnson, and like my brother George Malandrakis, I too am a member of Plumbers and Gas Fitters Local Union Number 1 for 36 years. I am one of about 25,000 members of highly skilled members in New York State who install gas pipe. A few things I just want to highlight. Many of my family members, friends, and thousands of union members, as well as fellow New Yorkers, would be hurt by this legislation. There's been no final cost analysis of what it would cost individuals and businesses to meet these changes. This plan will require massive electrification of the grid without guaranteeing that there's enough power to keep the lights on. Homeowners and businesses would be facing less reliable power and would be required to pay more for it. One of the terms that most in this room are familiar with is environmental justice. Another term that New Yorkers may have to become more familiar with is energy poverty, which is what happens when most New Yorkers who are low to middle income are forced to pay electric bills that are as much as 3 or 4 times higher than they're currently paying. Natural gas is a vital part of New York life. If natural gas is phased out as the CAC recommends, that would leave the grid even more vulnerable than it is currently, not to mention periods of low sun and low wind. While wind, solar, and geothermal are all great emerging technologies, they're currently unpredictable and can't supply the power that New Yorkers need. In most neighborhoods, on any hot or cold day, it's not uncommon to have brownouts or blackouts because there isn't enough power to go around. These additional demands placed on the system are not going to get any better. In a perfect world, guys, you would flip a switch and it would be great. We're going to fix this, guys, but this has to be a solution that includes everybody in this room. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses, is this group 15? Did you serve yourself? Okay. Could we get group 17 lining up behind Patrick? Moses?
Jose Encarnacio, Plumbers Local 1.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, council members. I'm a born and raised Brooklynite, born in the 70s. Went through all the not smoking and within populations in the city, throughout phasing out all type of pollutions. I experienced in 2006 the power outage. I was in the middle of the Holland Tunnel. And, it was right after 9/11, so I was like shaken up by that. But I think that by the power going out and then taking out, territorial, like from Canada, New York, and a few states out of one shot, and thousands of people in emergency rooms, depending on electricity, to supply their life support systems. And thank God we had natural gas to power out their emergency generators that kept those hospitals running. And for the people in New York City that depended on their heat, They needed the gas. Yes, we all got to reduce this carbon footprint. I'm all for it. But we also got to make, not put all our chips on the table at one shot, just on one bet. We got to spread them out and have a backup plan. When the light goes out, we have the gas to back us up and keep us warm and generate power as well. We could, we have the technologies to make ourselves a little more efficient instead of deleting it all at once. Thank you for hearing my words.
Thank you. Patrick?
Rafael Cruz, Plumbers Local 1.
Hi, Council. Hello again. So we heard a lot of things here today, and a lot of it makes sense, yes. But I'm gonna put everything into like a few words, right? So today, when you all go home, shut the gas off so you have nothing to cook, no heat, and then try to turn the power on with the lights. But to make lights, you need gas. So now you have nothing. That's what we're facing right now. It's going too fast. And yeah, a lot of people spoke a lot of sense, but we are professionals. Me and my brothers and my sisters, we pipe these pipes that brings that gas to you. And we know it's not easy to do. It doesn't change like that. It takes time, training. We've been trained, had to prove to the city that we are able to do this. And it's a very hard test, and it's very expensive. Fail or pass. Nonetheless, we did it. We're still going to do it forever. But I just want you to think, we are going too fast. Let's slow down and look at the big picture, not just of everything that emotions and everything are involved here. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses?
Andy Imbrero, Plumbers Local 1.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. I'm here tonight because if I live in the neighborhood of Cypress Hills of Brooklyn, that's in East New York, and for the last few years, my neighbors and I have to rely on generators in the summertime in order to keep the lights on. The grid, the electrical grid in our neighborhood, it doesn't work. Everybody has electrical on, the power just drops. You get 50 volt coming out of the outlets. Ceiling fans don't work, lights are very dim. All of us have to rely on generators that are powered by natural gas. Now, instead of having all of this going on, why don't you just focus on upgrading what you have now, make it work, and then think about switching over to taking whatever you guys want to do. Now, another thing is, everybody speak about Hurricane Ada, yes. In my neighborhood, there's no water near us, and one of my neighbors died because of flooding. Now, what caused the flooding? The major downfall from the water, the sewer system doesn't hold it, but you don't see that in your plan, upgrading the sewer system. That's one of the main reasons you got all these flooding from all these weather changes. Now, massive waterfall, it's not going to change. So, try to focus on upgrading what you have now, making what you have now work, and then think about making a change, okay? That's it.
Thank you. Patrick.
Philder Barnes, Jamaica, New York.
Good afternoon. I'm so glad I'm here to actually tell you how I feel about your bill. It's ridiculous. My senior citizens in Southern East Queens, how do you expect them to do this changeover if you pass this bill for a heating unit that's going to cost them $1,700? You're creating homelessness, okay? The infrastructure, Edison has not done nothing. My husband laid in the funeral parlor when they had the blackout. I couldn't bury my husband, so tell me how that feels, all right? Then you talk about jobs. I'm 39 years in, 39 years in. I've worked in the cold, the rain, the sleet, and the snow to provide gas, okay? I've not been in the office. I've been outside, all right? And these people need their jobs. And the comprehensive pay that they make, it's not really enough because your new partner today is $2,300, and that's in your electric buildings. So this is not going to fly. All right, I talked about the infrastructure. It's terrible. My seniors and saving the jobs. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moses.
Jonna Berger, NYPIRG.
Thank you. NYPIRG strongly supports the CAC draft scoping plan recommendation on page 128, which states, as soon as possible, the state should pass legislation that enables the establishment and enforcement of efficiency standards for appliances that are sold, leased, or installed in New York State. The Advanced Building Codes Appliances and Equipment Efficiency Standards Act 7 S7176 Parker and A8143 Fahey embodies this recommendation and is supported by 217 national, statewide, and regional organizations. This bill removes barriers in the energy law that hinder needed updates to the energy code so it aligns with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the CLCPA, goals by improving energy efficiency standards for the construction, rehabilitation, and operation of new buildings, products, and appliances, and adds a provision for prioritizing the CLCPA goals using a newly defined life cycle cost analysis emphasizing carbon emission reductions. Energy efficiency is critical to solving the climate crisis. In most cases, efficiency measures have proven to be the most cost-effective way to address climate change while reducing energy waste, saving money, and affordably expanding the use of renewable energy resources. Given the increasing threat posed by climate change, the state must do all it can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Enhancing efficiency standards is a vital step to take. This bill's product and appliance standards are estimated to result in $15 billion utility bill savings by 2035 for consumers, including an estimated $6 billion for low to moderate income families. The adoption of improved energy efficiency standards and greenhouse gas reductions conserve energy and water, reduces pollutions, and save money. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick.
Alex Beauchamp, Northeast Region Director, Food and Water Watch.
Hey, thanks so much for the time to speak. I'm Alex Beauchamp. I'm the Northeast Region Director at Food and Water Watch. We're a national environmental group, proud to have over 100,000 supporters here in New York State. We support Scenario 3 as speaker after speaker after speaker has urged you to adopt. My simple message for tonight is we must get off gas now. I mean that, I guess, in all respects, but I want to focus mostly on buildings. In buildings, the most meaningful thing we can do in the short term is to ban fossil fuels starting in 2024 in all new buildings. Your draft plan has that in there. That is really exciting that it's in there. Sadly, though, we need to pass it before your plan is finalized. So today I urge, which you say in the draft plan that we should pass it in 2022. So I urge Governor Hochul and our legislators to pass the All Electric Building Act this session. We have to get it done. And I want to close, I guess, by saying, you know, I've been to 1 million of these hearings or similar hearings, and there are always voices of reaction on the other side, or reactionary voices, rather, usually propped up one way or another by the fossil fuel industry. They have always been wrong. They will always be wrong. And if you think back to what we've done as a state, when have we taken action and looked back and said, geez, we moved a little too quickly there. We shouldn't have moved off fossil fuels quite so fast. And the reverse happens every damn year. It cannot continue to happen. And I'll say one last thing about that. The IPCC report, the most recent one, was yet another dire report saying we have to act now or never. Buried in there, though, is a warning about the political power of the fossil fuel industry. They warn over and over and over again. So it's not just me telling you to ignore the fossil fuel industry, it's the world's foremost experts on climate. Don't listen to them. Ban gas now.
Thank you. Moses?
Elizabeth Stein, Lead Counsel for Energy Transition at the Environmental Defense Fund.
Thank you. The greenhouse gas limits established in the CLCPA will require emission reductions in every sector of New York's economy. This includes medium and heavy-duty vehicles, which make up only 5% of vehicles in the state, but produce around a quarter of the greenhouse gas emissions and around half of all nitrogen oxides and particulate matter emissions attributable to New York's on-road vehicles. Transitioning to zero-emission trucks and buses will be crucial for meeting the state's climate goals and for mitigating the local air pollution that disproportionately harms the state's most vulnerable residents. The state has already taken important early steps, including the DEC's adoption of the Advanced Clean Truck Rule. But robust vehicle adoption rules will only be as effective as the fueling or charging capacity on the ground allows, and in that realm, there has been a marked absence of action. To that end, several actions, all requiring coordination among state entities, are needed. First, the PSC and other relevant state agencies, together with New York's electric utilities, need to take steps now to understand the amount of charging infrastructure needed to meet the state's goals, to begin forecasting and planning with those goals in mind, and to implement programs that are scaled to meet those goals. Unfortunately, as of now, no such concerted effort to prepare the grid for truck and bus electrification at any particular scale is underway. Second, the PSC must focus on the impacts vehicle electrification will have on the larger grid and how tools like behind-the-meter resources and efficient price signals can mitigate those impacts. Together with managed charging programs and a concerted effort to pair distributed energy resources with truck and bus charging, sound price signals can help decarbonize the grid while mitigating peak demand and associated grid upgrades and decreasing costs for all ratepayers. Finally, addressing near-term costs of transition is critical. Getting infrastructure to a point where electric trucks and buses can compete fairly against diesel trucks and buses promises enormous benefits to a variety of stakeholders. The scoping plan must address the critical need for the state to identify and harness novel funding sources to complement electric ratepayer contributions. Where possible, state and federal dollars should be leveraged to facilitate voluntary private investment in this transition. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Raina Cohen from Align.
My name is Raina Cohen, and I am the State Climate Policy Coordinator with Align and Chair of the New York Renews Labor Committee. New York has a once-in-a-lifetime chance to create thousands of good green union jobs, to combat the race to the bottom that has gutted workers' wages, benefits, and rights, and to grow the labor movement's strength, all while investing in our disadvantaged communities. To do all of this, however, we need more. New Yorkers need a scoping plan that provides better protections for existing and new workers. For workers in communities reliant on fossil fuel industries, the scoping plan must recommend a worker and community assurance fund to provide worker pension support and wage replacement and funding for tax-based replacement. For the over 200,000 new green workers in the next decade, about 50,000 of whom will be right here in New York City, the scoping plan must require prevailing wage, benefits, project labor agreements, community benefits agreements, and local hiring on projects that use state funds or take place on state property. New Yorkers also need a scoping plan that emphasizes jobs growth and workforce development. It should recommend best value procurement and Buy New York provisions to create manufacturing jobs and supply chain jobs. It must also include concrete strategies to support a 38% workforce expansion, including funding for workforce development and wage coverage for worker attendance. Finally, the scoping plan must propose an economy-wide polluter fee to ensure dedicated climate funding paid for by the corporations fueling the problem. Across New York, our workers and our communities are already creating the blueprint for a just transition. Align's Green and Healthy Schools campaign is demonstrating how investments in solar and building retrofits provide healthier classrooms for our children while creating union jobs, including for traditionally excluded groups. With their green workforce training, our partners at 32BJ have shown how training for union members can generate significant energy efficiency gains. Upstate, our partners at CWA are pushing renewable energy manufacturers to build out high-quality union jobs, illustrating how our energy transition can be used to grow our labor movement and our middle class. And finally, with Sunset Park Solar, our partners at Uprose have shown how renewable energy projects can be developed for and by our communities, help combat energy burden, and provide job opportunities for local residents.
Thank you. Moses?
Constance Bradley from Brooklyn, New York, president of TWU Local 101.
Good evening, and thank you. My name is Constance Bradley, president of Transport Workers Union Local 101 from Brooklyn, New York. I'm going to get right to the point. My members, 1,600 blue-collar workers, and our union brothers and sisters from National Grid, Long Island, Staten Island, and other parts of the state, we are mad. Why? Once again, blue-collar workers are in jeopardy of being tossed to the side. Make no mistakes. The path that New York is taking will eliminate good-paying union jobs that has sustained families for generations, jobs that put food on the table, pay the rent or mortgage, and put your children through college. In minority neighborhoods like Brownsville, Brooklyn, where I grew up, National Grid jobs offer much more than just a paycheck. They offer hope. Hope for a better future for your children. Hope for us to retire with comfort and dignity. Hope that you can, too, live the American dream. To the CAC, I say this: you can keep these good jobs. You can keep these much needed new hope and opportunities in blue collars communities. You can do this while also protecting the precious resources of this planet. The Transport Workers Union, TWU Local 101, support effort to progressively and aggressively curb pollution. This can be done with an approach that include increased electrification, battery and storage, and solar power, offshore wind, and using the existing natural gas infrastructure to support renewable natural gas. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I get groups 17 and 18 behind Patrick? Moses?
Sure. How do you pronounce the name?
Celeste Streeter.
Celeste Streeter, TWU, Local 101.
Good evening. My name is Celeste Streeter, and I am here today to voice my concerns as both a National Grid customer and a National Grid employee. We can all agree that climate change is one of the biggest threats we face today, and I strongly support the CAC's commitment to lowering dangerous emissions to stop it. However, we must make the right choices that support safe, affordable, and reliable energy to all customers. New York State's climate law is amongst the most ambitious of the world. Their draft scoping plan, released in December, is also very ambitious in favoring the use of electricity for heating and cooking in all homes and businesses across the state. This concerns me for several reasons. It bans all gas appliances, taking away my rights as a consumer to choose. It seeks to decommission existing gas networks, eliminating renewable natural gas and hydrogen as options for heating. It offers no plan to sustain the unprecedented level of new renewable electricity generation development required in the next 8 years. I think many of you can understand my sentiments of doubting the reliability of existing electrical grid during the summer amidst the heat wave, much less having the confidence that my electricity will remain on with more than 3 times the current load. It makes no assessment of customer costs. Working people like myself are fighting to stay above the rate of inflation, and some of us are holding on by the skin of our teeth. Being forced to pay $30,000 to $40,000 to convert to all electrical appliances will make living in New York unaffordable. As a National Grid employee, my concern is that the CAC's plan to eliminate the infrastructure of safe RNG and hydrogen will eliminate thousands of jobs. We cannot let clean energy transition undermine economic growth and put New Yorkers out of work. There is a better way. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Grant McCown, member of New York Renews.
Thank you, Climate Action Council, for today and your presence to hear our concerns regarding the scoping plan of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. I'm especially glad to see Rhea Salter and Peter Iwanowitz. I attended a Zoom you hosted, and you are inspirational in your advocacy for environmental justice. Thank you. I'm here simply as a voice for the thousands of people in my community in New York who are unable to testify and so are voiceless. So many people, so many concerns. It's impossible to speak to all their concerns in 2 minutes. So many of my colleagues today, everybody across the board, have spoken to those concerns eloquently. So I've chosen 2 aspects that seem to be the simplest and most important. I call them the 2 F's. The first F, false solutions, untried, unproven solutions. We must focus on the true proven solutions, especially renewable zero-emission solutions, wind tech, solar tech, the natural, clean, unlimited energy of our Earth, of our planet. The second F, fund the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It's the law. New York must establish a dedicated funding mechanism. The Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, wow, what a name. It is the law. Fund it. So thank you, Climate Action Council. Another great name, Climate Action Council. It speaks of itself. New Yorkers, just so you know, New Yorkers have got your back. New Yorkers are all unstoppable. A new New York is possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I just want to let everybody know it's 7:15. We have about 45 minutes left. Moses?
Frederico Oosterholk with Brooklyn Persists.
Thank you. Dear Climate Action Council, thank you for the ability to speak here today. As a Brooklyn resident, avid biker, mother of 2 toddlers, and human, I believe that clean air is a right, and it is our responsibility to provide it to all. It is important to make and vigorously enforce policies that protect our environment. With combined power, we can work towards a healthier future. A window in our house needed to be replaced. In the process, we realized there was no insulation in the walls. I'm sure our house isn't the only one. Imagine working with homeowners to fully insulate all houses in New York. We would use a fraction of the energy that we use today. Make policies that force homeowners to include insulations and good windows in new constructions and renovations. I also think we should extend subsidies to install solar panels and electric storage to homeowners so that solutions can be decentralized and be held up by many rather than recreate a monoculture of energy. We all need to do our share. Yours is to pass Solution 3 and ensure it's properly funded and enforceable. So up and at 'em.
Thank you. Could we get group 19, please, behind Moses? Thank you. Patrick?
Ethan Dubin, Brooklyn, New York.
Hi, my name is Ethan Dubin. I've lived in Brooklyn for 10 years. I'm a proud resident. My family in California and Colorado evacuated their homes due to historic fires during historic droughts. Hurricane Ida damaged my home, flooded those of my neighbors. And by 2030, the superstorms of that magnitude are projected to come every 5 years at the current pace of greenhouse gases. I'd like to make a few comments on buildings. Firstly, thank you for the progressive and accelerated plan that you have. The building that I work in on the Lower East Side greets me every day with its posted energy rating, which is a big fat F. That's probably no surprise to you. While we electrify new construction by 2024 and decarbonize old buildings, I ask that you heed the calls of the Climate Justice Work Group, that you commit at least $1 billion to support a just transition for disadvantaged communities, including targeted investments to protect against the predatory business practices and rate hikes of our investor-owned utilities. And by the way, we must transition to public power to make that happen. End subsidies for fossil fuels and implement subsidies for highly efficient heat pumps that will not overburden the electrical system in commercial, residential, and especially affordable housing. The current grid gets overwhelmed because of inefficiencies that we will and must address. That I also ask that the plan include a requirement to map out clean energy workforce development. I care about my labor brothers and sisters. I am a member of 2 labor unions. We can take them with us. Jobs do not need to be lost. In fact, if we do all these plans right, we can have a 10-to-1 ratio of jobs created to lost. That seems worth fighting for. We also need a major statewide climate-friendly public education campaign to combat the fossil fuel industry. Why? Because they are expert at disseminating misinformation, undermining public support, and political will to wean us off fossil fuels. I'm an avid cook. How did I not know about the harmful respiratory illnesses caused by gas stoves until just last year? The science is 30 years old. I support scenario 3 from the CAC. Council members, you must think long-term, and long-term is getting a whole lot shorter. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses?
Matthew Moore, Missioner for Environmental Justice, Episcopal Diocese of Long Island.
Good evening. I'm Father Matthew Moore. I am the Missioner for Environmental Justice for the Episcopal Diocese of Long Island. I live in Flatbush, and I serve as priest associate at Church of the Nativity. I'm here today because my faith teaches me that love of God, love of neighbor, and love of the earth are inseparable. Many of our parishioners come from island nations in the Caribbean that are imperiled by rising seas. Many come from nations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, where climate change is already causing flooding, crop failures, and famine. Here in New York City, we see that economically deprived communities whose residents are primarily people of color are most vulnerable to extreme heat, and that communities like Sunset Park are subjected to poor air quality by the polluting infrastructure there. The connections between racial justice, economic justice, and environmental justice could not be clearer. By passing the CLCPA, New York State promised to take meaningful steps toward justice for all people and for the earth. As a Christian and as a citizen of this state, I urge you to live up to those promises by rejecting false solutions like renewable natural gas and green hydrogen. I urge you to adopt scenario 3 from your own Climate Action Council so that we can begin a rapid and far-reaching transition away from fossil fuels. The hour is late. The time to act is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Maritza Silva Farrell, Executive Director at Align, Alliance for a Greater New York.
Thank you. So, my name is Maritza Silva Farrell. I run the Alliance for Greater New York. We are an organization that builds coalitions with labor unions and community groups. And the work that we have been doing has been specifically at the intersection of climate change and income inequality. So many of the groups who have been part of New York Renews have been part of our work for many years. And as a member of the Just Transition, I'm here and I'm thankful for the work that you all are doing in the CAC. So thank you for this evening. To do what we know is right, which is implement the CLCPA, the law of the land, we must ensure that there is investment for the climate solutions. NYSERDA has stated that we must invest $10 billion each year in our climate, while other sources suggest as much as $31 billion. Yet, in 3 years since CLCPA was passed, New York has failed to fund action at the scale we need, or even 10% to this scale. The final scoping plan must propose an economy-wide polluter fee to generate dedicated recurrent funding to reduce emissions and invest in green energy infrastructure. A polluter fee puts our biggest polluters, corporations, on the hook to pay for the damage they're causing. The same corporations that right now are trying really hard to divide our communities and our workers. Let's remember that. Investing in green economy also means investing in jobs. Every 1 million invested in sectors like solar or mass transit creates between 7 and 22 new jobs, 6 times more jobs creation than investments in fossil fuel. Finally, just because I don't have a lot of time, I want to say that it is not a matter of if we transition to a green economy, but how. The state has an obligation to us, its people, to treat CLCPA mandates as legal, enforceable. Without the ability to enforce this law, our climate justice legislation will become meaningless. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses?
Ken Schless, Food and Water Watch.
My name is Ken Schless. I'm a father of 2, a third-generation Brooklynite, and a lead volunteer with Food and Water Watch, a group with over 80,000 supporters in New York City. I grew up suffering with asthma, which nearly took my life several times. In 2016, I nearly died from a heart attack. Last year, my home was flooded by Hurricane Ida. Last month, I contracted COVID. I endure the continued consequences of climate pollution and climate inaction. But for how much longer? For clean air and a healthy environment, we must electrify. New York must choose scenario 3 of the Climate Action Council's recommendations. Methane-based solutions need to be avoided. Bio-derived or fossil-extracted methane remains a carcinogen 85 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It's proven to leak profusely in homes and up and down the distribution stream. Similarly, energy-intensive green hydrogen, another false solution, has no place in our energy future. Promoted by the same industry lobbyists and monopoly utilities who fought against the CLCPA and every environmental bill introduced since, these expensive, energy-intensive options only serve to delay and distract. They are schemes to protect shareholder profit and continue environmentally destructive legacies of extraction. In effect, they slow walk us towards an apocalyptic future, wasting time we don't have, condemning many along the way to a premature death. The scoping plan must ensure that mandates by the Climate Action Council contain emission reduction timelines enforceable by law, move immediately to enact statewide gas ban to meet the Climate Action Council's goal of 1 to 2 million electrified homes by 2030, build public renewables because market solutions have failed, ban proof of work crypto farms because polluting sectors have no place in New York's transition. New York needs a rapid transition now. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Senior Attorney, Environmental Defense Fund.
Thank you, council members, for still being here. You heard from my colleague Elizabeth Stein about the electric system, and I have 3 quick points to make about the gas system. One is the need for gas transition planning. The CLCPA and the draft scoping plan require a greatly diminished use of fossil gas and downsizing the fossil gas distribution system, but we know that this won't happen overnight. To effectuate this transition while minimizing customer costs, the Public Service Commission must institute comprehensive long-term planning requirements for gas utilities. The draft plan correctly identifies the need to plan for a managed contraction of the gas distribution system, but the Commission is continuing to approve utility cost recovery for pipeline infrastructure over the next 60+ years. And docket 20G0131, the gas planning docket, is seemingly stalled. To ensure progress, the Climate Action Council should provide clear direction to the Commission on this topic. 2, low carbon fuels. The Council must carefully consider the limitations and actual greenhouse gas emissions associated with alternative fuels such as hydrogen and RNG. Hydrogen is an indirect greenhouse gas, and new research demonstrates that hydrogen transportation and storage represents significant leakage risks that must be assessed before pursuing significant investment. 3, reducing methane. Leaks from the gas distribution system are a significant source of methane and a safety hazard, and peer-reviewed research demonstrates that advanced leak detection technology finds more gas leaks with greater accuracy compared to the traditional survey methods deployed by most gas utilities. The draft plan correctly identifies the need for state regulators to mandate the use of these advanced technologies, and the plan should identify with particularity how state agencies can set comprehensive standards to find and fix more methane leaks. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Patrick, why don't you do another?
John Pope, Food and Water Watch.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and thanks for staying around. My name is John Pope, and I'm a volunteer with Food and Water Watch, and we are in full support of Scenario 3, and I'd also like to see us put as much pressure as we can to pass the All-Electric Buildings Act and have our new construction be electrified. We need to get a moratorium on Bitcoin mining, and we would also like to see the Public Renewables Act get passed so that we can actually move forward on this. And I'm going to go off script here. I'm a general contractor here in New York City. I have a very small company, but we're doing 2 electrifying projects right now. And it can be done, but it cannot be done at the scale we need to do it without funding this. I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to have to spend a lot of money, but ultimately it's our money that we're asking you to reinvest in us. And we really need to, I mean, the time for screwing around is kind of over. We need to do this now. So thank you for allowing this opportunity.
Thank you. Moses?
Maria Barbara Lopez, Uprose, Damas de Sunset Park.
Gracias. Muchas gracias por su atención a ustedes. Soy Bárbara López. Vivo en Sunset Park, una comunidad de justicia ambiental por 43 años.
My name is Barbara Lopez, and I live in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, a community of environmental justice, and I've been there for 43 years.
Soy emigrante trabajadora en Sunset Park. Alberga la costa industrial más grande de Nueva York.
I am an immigrant and a working person in Sunset Park that holds the largest industrial coastline in the city of New York.
Vulnerable a los impactos climáticos extremos.
Which is extremely vulnerable to the impact of climatic change, extreme climatic change.
La supertormenta Sandy contaminó de toda clase.
The super hurricane Sandy contaminated the whole area.
Salir de casa a caminar por la comunidad, unas calles.
going out and walking along the community, through the streets.
Volvemos llenos de polvo que nos causa ardor, comezón, irritación y más.
We come home full of a powder that causes burning sensation and asthmatic symptoms and irritation.
Vivir con 3 plantas centrales de estaciones de transferencia de desechos.
To live near 3 central plants and stations of garbage transfer and traffic.
En camiones de diésel pesados, etc.
And traffic, miles of traffic of heavy diesel trucks, etc., etc.
Nos impacta gravemente a todos.
It has a very strong impact on all of us.
Respiramos monóxido de carbono que debilita nuestra humanidad.
We breathe in carbon monoxide that puts in danger our lives.
Causa muertes repentinas a niños y a mayores especialmente.
It causes sudden death to children and especially to people of the third age, the elderly.
La CLCPA es la oportunidad para abordar el cambio climático.
The CLCPA is an opportunity to approach climate change.
Las necesidades de la comunidad de la primera línea en Sunset Park.
The communities that live on the first line in Sunset Park.
Tenemos el Distrito de Resiliencia Industrial Verde, GRID.
We have the Resilient District of Green Industrial Grid.
Liderado por la comunidad, queremos transformar el litoral industrial.
Led by the community, we want to transform the industrial environment.
Resolveremos problemas de salud que
we would solve health problems.
Crearemos empleos locales y apoyar la adaptación y mitigación.
We will create local employment and support adaptation
y resiliencia climática.
Change and climatic resilience.
La CLCPA debe establecer objetivos claros para reemplazar los combustibles fósiles contaminantes.
The CLCPA must establish clear goals to replace fossil combustion that contaminates.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Moses, why don't you keep going?
Helen Noasu, VP of Social Impact for PROS.
Hi, thank you for having us and listening to us. I'm actually a little bit different from everyone because I'm coming from private industry. PROS is a direct-to-consumer hair care company based here in Brooklyn. We're also a certified B Corp. And for those of you guys who don't know, a certified B Corp is a company that has committed to doing well by the planet, the people, and its community. As a certified B Corp, we measure our climate impact every year, and we share that transparently with our consumers. The reason that we do that is because we want them to understand what the impact of doing business is, and we also want to be able to mitigate what our impact is. When you do your carbon footprint, you also begin to realize that a lot of your impact is out of your hands. So as a direct-to-consumer company, the shippers that bring our products to our consumers account for much of our carbon footprint. The CLCPA has legislation that can really affect our impact by electrifying vehicles and trucks and creating some type of regulatory environment. In addition to that, and insofar as the community, We are a company that has decided to keep our manufacturing here in New York for specific reasons, keeping jobs here. Our manufacturing warehouse is in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And Sunset Park, Brooklyn is a community that's come up a lot here today. It's 46% Asian immigrants. It's AAPI month, so to acknowledge the hard work that our Asian Americans have done here for us and making sure that we do right by them. So being able to have legislation that puts climate justice, environmental justice for those who have been marginalized in the past is something that's really important to us as an industry, not only as a beauty industry, but for us as a company. And lastly, I speak as an immigrant. I'm from South Sudan, probably one of the newest countries in the world. I came here when I was quite young. I've just got done putting geothermal energy in my house.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moses, could I just know how many people are left to speak? All right. Where'd you go, Patrick? Oh. Could we get group 19, please? Group 20? Moses?
Annie Carforo, Climate Justice Campaign Coordinator, We Act for Environmental Justice.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for creating this opportunity to testify on behalf of We Act for Environmental Justice, a 33-year-old community-based organization founded in West Harlem. I'm here to address a number of concerns we will expand upon in written testimony, but in summary, we call on the CAC to execute the Climate Justice Working Group's recommendations to the fullest extent in the name of protecting the health and well-being of disadvantaged communities. First, frontline communities need more than a vague commitment for benefits. The state needs to develop an investment rubric to ensure high and consistent standards for what qualifies as beneficial spending, so benefits will actually accrue in disadvantaged communities. We need a non-exhaustive list of benefits that should qualify, including reduced localized pollution, health benefits related to reduced exposure to extreme heat and cold, and economic benefits related to job creation and energy efficiency savings. Second, this has been mentioned a lot this evening, but false solutions do not belong in our renewable energy future. Frontline communities are already forced to bear a disproportionate burden of polluting facilities that exacerbate poor health outcomes. We Act opposes the promotion of false solutions, including green hydrogen, renewable natural gas, biofuels, biomass, that add more greenhouse gas emissions to the environment rather than less and lead to more localized pollution concentrated in environmental justice communities. We oppose false market-based solutions that allow major polluters to abdicate responsibility for lowering their emissions by paying clean producers for their energy. Basically, false solutions are wasting crucial time and resources that we cannot afford to waste, and they have no place in this landmark legislation. And finally, impacted communities need to be leading the way to a just transition. Stakeholders from disadvantaged communities must be included in all adaptation and resiliency planning. Community benefit agreements, which are crucial to the overall health of a disadvantaged community, need to be legally binding. And the state must eliminate implicit bias when hiring workers to increase access to green union jobs that will allow communities of color to thrive in a clean energy future. The Climate Justice Working Group made all of these recommendations, none of which were included in the draft scoping plan.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Patrick?
Carrie Kirschbaum, Utility Consultation Group.
Hello, I'm making this statement on behalf of the Utility Consultation Group, or the UCG, representing New York's major electric and gas utilities. The UCG was formed in December of 2020 to provide expertise to the Climate Action Council and to be a resource for its advisory panels. Our companies operate the complex systems that deliver the energy our customers need in their homes and their businesses. We are committed to using our significant expertise to assist the state in achieving its emissions reduction goals. Given the complexity of energy systems and the transformation required to meet the state's goals, it is imperative that the state focus be on the continued provision of safe and reliable energy to our customers. To achieve deep decarbonization while ensuring reliable service requires optimization of energy delivery systems and reliance on a multitude of existing and future energy resources. We recommend keeping all energy options on the table at this early stage of the decarbonization process. Electrifying portions of our energy system that rely on other sources of energy will require additional infrastructure to meet the demands of a cleaner, larger electric network. We should look at the entirety of the energy system to ensure the most cost-effective approach to achievement of CLCPA goals. The gas distribution system must continue to serve customers safely and reliably. In a future, that system can facilitate energy decarbonization by flowing low and no carbon energy like renewable natural gas and hydrogen. We support robust research initiatives to develop these and other necessary technologies, such as electric storage, carbon capture, and geothermal systems. With our proven track record of emissions reductions and meeting energy delivery needs, we are committed to helping the state meet its climate goals while together ensuring a reliable, safe, cost-effective, clean energy future for our customers. Thanks.
Thank you. Could we get group 20, please, down behind Moses? Do we get 19? I am 19, 20, 20, 21? Moses?
Adam Harkin, Council Representative for the New York City District Council of Carpenters.
Good evening. My name is Adam Harkin. I'm a council representative for the New York City District Council of Carpenters. We represent a multitude of trades ranging from dock builders and millwrights to interior system carpenters. Climate change is a real and persistent challenge that we will be trying to mitigate for years to come. Whether it be offshore wind and solar energy, the importance to switch from fossil fuels to greener technologies is there. What is also important is how we get there. Currently, the carpenters have many members working in the energy field, whether it be the dock builder or the timberman supporting the excavation for utility work, or the millwright working in the power plant to realign a gas turbine. These skilled men and women work every day to help bring power to the city and state. These are prevailing wage jobs that allow our members to be a valued part of the middle class. As we transition away from fossil fuels, it is imperative that these hardworking men and women do not get left behind. In order to do this, the state must establish an Office of Just Transition with the necessary funding and expertise that can coordinate across all agencies involved. This office must address the real possibility of worker displacement and how it can be mitigated through training on the new greener technologies as they become available. Along with this, there must be labor standards and the implementation of New York State prevailing wages. This will help ensure that the hardworking men and women that are currently working on these projects continue to be able to live, work, and spend in the city and state of New York. Thank you for my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Jessica Roth from Brooklyn, New York.
Hi, my name is Jessica Roth. I am a fourth generation Brooklynite from so-called Brooklyn occupied Lenape, Muncie, and Canarsie lands. And honestly, I frankly expect more of New York. Actually, I demand more. We hold ourselves out as climate leaders and progressives. Governor Cuomo even changed the name of the CLCPA to take credit for the work that environmental justice leaders worked so hard for. But climate leaders don't build new fossil fuel infrastructure. Climate leaders don't let the development and real estate and fossil fuel companies decide what's right for New Yorkers and the planet. Climate and progressive leaders definitely do not build pipelines and vaporizers in black and brown communities to carry the dirty energy practices of the rest of the state. It's time to fully implement and fund the CLCPA and move through a just transition with investment in frontline communities and job training and employment programs to ensure that labor is the partner and builder of this future. We need option 3 in a fully electrified transportation sector, complete transition to a clean economy by 2050, a zero emissions electric grid by 2040, and benchmarks with a real, just, equitable, renewable energy, not false solutions. We need a moratorium on fossil fuel plants, clean deadlines for phasing out dirty energy and procuring renewables, and a 2024 mandate for all electric new building construction. The building around the corner from me was finished just a few years ago. It has an F rating. I live in Gowanus. We are in the middle of a massive, ridiculously stupid rezone where we're going to build thousands and thousands of units on top of a Superfund site. And we don't even have anything in place to make sure that any of those buildings are energy efficient or that we're moving them off gas. So we're going to have fossil fuels in the middle of a Superfund site with no process to deal with it. That's a terrible idea. We need a massive investment in getting our homes off fossil fuel. If we don't stop building fossil fuel infrastructure and buildings and transportation dependent on fossil fuels, we're running up a down escalator and we're never going to meet our climate goals, let alone ones we actually need to stop the crisis. We're way past the time of feasibility standards, studies, slowing down, being cautious. We've been doing that for decades and it's gotten us nowhere. We need bold action and bold leadership now. Failure to make these changes is literally the definition of insanity.
Thank you. Moses?
Charlie Feuerman, Nuclear, New York.
Hi. You must be exhausted, so thank you. Last week was Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day. Much of my family on both sides were murdered in the war. My great-grandparents, the only survivors. This is true for some of my friends as well. But the best thing that we ever came up with upon reflecting on the events of the 20th century was never again. So now there's this imperialist war in Ukraine, and we're called upon to defend their right to live in peace and with freedom. So we boycott Russian gas, right? But not every country can do this so easily. Germany has depended upon Russia for 1/3 of its total energy use. Their new plan to reduce their imports may devastate their economy, with predictions of a recession that kills 400,000 jobs. We can't be like Germany, whose grid dependence results in the aid of moral atrocity. Martin Luther King wrote, "Love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. And our electricity grid, this is power." I want to convey the moral import of energy independence, of having a stable grid right here at home, in-state transmission lines. We must plan our futures with this in mind so we can stand up for human rights when duty calls. Yet our American prosperity cannot be gained off the backs of vulnerable communities halfway across the globe. But we have the technology to rise to this challenge, and have faith in this plan that we can do it. What's both clean and reliable? How do we displace fossil? Nuclear energy. Our energy mix must include nuclear, protecting existing plants and building new ones. Let's have the power to stand up for justice. Let's have a clean conscience when we say never again.
Thank you. Patrick, could I get groups 23 and 24 behind Moses, please?
Next, Langdon Marsh, former commissioner of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation.
Thank you. I was that in the mid-90s, and I congratulate Commissioner Sagos for having the best job in the world. So I wanted to just say a few things about how to make the plan more efficient and targeted using some techniques that have been tried in various places around the country. First of all, I'm a firm believer and have been involved in efforts to increase the use of life cycle analysis, and I've seen in the plan several references to it, particularly in the waste management section. But it has great applicability throughout the plan, and I'd like to see more of its principles and techniques applied to make sure that the investments that are going to be made are specifically targeted at producing good benefits and nothing else. The second point I wanted to make is about recognition of the role that ecosystem services can play in assisting the plan to be more targeted, to be more efficient, and to produce multiple benefits. A good example for here in New York City is the planting of trees for avoiding heat islands. Throughout most of the boroughs, there aren't enough trees to prevent these terrible heat waves from having a bad impact. And the final thing is maybe the most important, is I think we need some new financing mechanisms to help building owners and individual landowners, building owners to finance things like solar roofs and heat pumps and so forth by allowing the city to issue bonds to finance the first cost of those, and then have the owners pay back the cost of it over the life of the investment.
Thank you for your comments. Moses?
Adering Salah
Babawale. I'm with the No North Brooklyn Pipeline Coalition. And I want to echo what was just said. We do need more green spaces in our city. Also, we need divestment from fossil fuels and investment in renewables. In 2017, National Grid built a pipeline in Secret through our neighborhood. And not only was that pipeline built illegally, it was not built with the consent of the community. So that pipeline was built for shareholders to increase their profits without the due diligence of community members knowing exactly what was going on, adding to the already existing health disparities. I want everyone in this room to know no one is born with asthma. Asthma is something that develops influx over time because of particulate matter that exists in communities. So my environmental justice community, that is Brownsville of Brooklyn, New York, has a lot of health disparities, and that is because of the particulate matter pollution, the carbon methane emissions, and we're not going to know the full environmental impact of these kinds of infrastructures until time passes. We cannot wait. That's why it is important we divest today. And a just transition means funding our solutions. That means renewable innovation. In Brownsville, Brooklyn, we have solar pioneers, which solarized over 1,000 homes in Brownsville. I want to see a commitment made to fund more local solutions in our neighborhood, because that's what's going to save us. And also, we need projects that are designed acknowledging accountability of these harms, that are committed without our knowledge. I also want to say decolonization of our energy efforts. National Grid is a UK-based company. They are not an American-based company. They go to Black and brown communities to build this kind of infrastructure illegally without our consent. So stop funding fossil fuels, start funding renewables, and put your money where your mouth at. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Tim Kent, Food and Water Watch.
Thank you very much. I'm Tim Kent. I'm a member of Food and Water Watch. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for holding these hearings. I would just like to say, based on some of the statements of the opposition, everyone in this room and their children should pick up smoking to support those jobs and those workers. We don't need false solutions like renewable natural gas and nuclear, which is they claim it's clean, but where's that waste going to go? And what kind of communities will it be placed in when it's constructed? Also, we need to oppose new fossil fuel infrastructure, including the North Brooklyn pipeline, which is rerouted from wealthier communities to poorer communities that do not have the resources they need to fight back. Fortunately, some great people are, and we are going to defeat them. And we do not need this new kind of infrastructure. I've heard a lot of opposition say, well, what about the cost? What about the cost to the consumer? Your rates are guaranteed to go up. Without a doubt, they're already trying to propose that with the North Brooklyn pipeline and all these other false solutions. Another one I've heard is the All-Electric Buildings Act. What about the $50,000 it will take to convert your home? The legislation as it's written now is only for new construction, so anything other than that is a clean, affordable solution is misinformation, and the people who spread it should be ashamed of themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses?
Victoria Queso, Campaign for Director for Climate Jobs, New York.
My name is Victoria Queso, and I am a campaign director with Climate Jobs New York, a growing coalition of private and public sector labor unions representing 2.6 million working men and women united around a shared goal of combating climate change, reversing income inequality, supporting more equitable communities, and creating good union jobs. We support the state's ambitious climate goals, and we are committed to working with the state to achieve these goals and build the new clean energy economy of the future with millions of good union jobs. We must safeguard the future of the workers, families, and communities most impacted by the movement away from fossil fuels, especially union members employed in the energy sector, and be sure this transition happens justly and smoothly. In order to do this, the state must establish an Office of Just Transition with the necessary funding and expertise that can coordinate across all the agencies involved in implementing the CLCPA. The Office of Just Transition would ensure that we don't take a piecemeal approach to addressing the real issues associated with the clean energy transition, including worker displacement and access to good union jobs in new clean energy industries. There must be strong labor standards and real protection for workers employed in construction, operations, maintenance, and manufacturing across all clean energy sectors, offshore and onshore wind, solar, battery storage, EVs, green hydrogen, geothermal, and other emerging technologies. We need strong implementation of the state's existing prevailing wage, project labor agreement, and labor peace requirements for large-scale renewable energy projects. To help meet the state's goals to deliver 40% of the benefits of our clean energy investments to disadvantaged communities, we need to utilize proven union apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs to conduct targeted recruitment of women, people of color, veterans, and members of frontline communities, for training that lead to middle-class union careers. To ensure the benefits of our clean energy investments directly benefit disadvantaged communities here in New York City, we should invest in upgrading our public schools with deep energy efficiency retrofits and the installation of solar and renewable energy, as we are calling for in our Carbon-Free and Healthy Schools campaign.
Thank you. Has anyone else not spoken yet who has a card? No? Well, you get the last word. Moses?
Mary Kate Boughton at Estonia, Queens.
I live in Astoria, which holds the sobering moniker of Asthma Alley, as you all know, due to its higher rates of asthma in the city, particularly among children, and which we know is caused by the dirty fossil fuel powered plants that flank the large neighborhood. I'm here today to speak on behalf of my friends and neighbors, real New Yorkers who can't be here today. As a mother of a young child, I can unequivocally state that my greatest fear, what keeps me awake at night, is the bleak future my son will face due to climate change if we don't take action now. And not words, but real action with real results. This fear is shared among all of the parents that I know in New York. According to data from the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication, an overwhelming majority of New Yorkers believe the governor and their elected officials should do more to address climate change. And even more New Yorkers believe that utilities should move to renewables. And even more than that, New Yorkers want to see corporations held accountable and forced to fund and fast-track real long-term solutions. We want an energy sector that invests in renewables, that maintains and trains workers and creates clean, well-paying jobs for New Yorkers, and that ends our reliance on dirty fossil fuels. We must stop the expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure from pipelines to power plants. We are beyond sick of the corruption and the fossil fuel industry obstructing immediate action to create a healthy environment for our families and communities. And we've heard a lot today about how to pay for this. A few notes. The onus of costs must be on the rich and those that cause the problem, not the people. We must tax the rich. And final note that no one seems to know, this country currently spends $6 trillion a year on fossil fuel subsidies and related costs. We can spend it on something else.
Thank you. I want to thank the facility for supporting us, and thank you for listening to each other. This hearing is now closed.